Arizona Cardinals, Josh Rosen, 2018. Arizona didn't stumble into Josh Rosen, they went and got him. On April 26, 2018, the Cardinals drafted him 10th overall as the franchise answer. Rosen's time at Arizona Cardinal can be categorized into three things: big expectations, ugly results, and lasting fallout. In 2018, he made 13 starts and went 3-10, finishing with 11 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and a 66.7 passer rating, while taking a brutal 45 sacks. The offense was clunky and the roster didn't help, but Rosen also struggled with the stuff that gets you benched fast: late reads, forcing throws into traffic, and giving defenses easy momentum swings. Rosen's lowest point came under the lights against Denver on October 18, 2018, a turnover flood that ended the game before it ever began. He threw 3 interceptions, had 2 lost fumbles, got sacked 6 times, and posted a 44.2 quarterback rating, and 2 of those picks were returned for touchdowns, pick sixes. That game is the perfect snapshot of why he lands here. Rosen made catastrophic mistakes that buried the team early and erased any chance of competing, and the aftermath sealed it. After 1 season, Arizona traded him away in 2019. Atlanta Falcons, Desmond Ridder, 2022 to 2023. Taken in the 3rd round of the 2022 NFL Draft, Ridder was handed the keys at the end of his rookie year and then entered 2023 as the full-time starter for a team that believed it was ready to win now. That context is everything. Atlanta had a strong run game, a top 10 draft pick at skill positions, and a weak division. The bar was more than stardom, it was competence. What followed was an offense that constantly sabotaged itself. Over 18 career starts, Ridder threw 14 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, added fumbles at the worst possible moments, and routinely stalled drives with late reads and hesitation in clean pockets. The most damaging issue was his processing speed, not arm strength or athleticism. Ridder routinely missed open targets, moved himself into trouble, and turned manageable downs into 3rd and longs that stalled drives. The defining stretch came in October 2023, when Atlanta benched him mid-season after a run of turnover-heavy performances. Against Washington in Week 6, Ridder threw a brutal red zone interception that flipped the game, then followed it up weeks later with multiple turnover games that forced Arthur Smith to pull him for Taylor Heineke. The takeaway was unavoidable. The Falcons were losing games they should have won because the quarterback couldn't be trusted to protect the football. By season's end, Atlanta moved on entirely, not because Ridder was hopeless, but because he represented a ceiling that trapped the franchise in mediocrity. Baltimore Ravens, Kyle Boller, 2003 to 2005. Kyle Boller is the clearest example of traits over reality going wrong. Baltimore drafted him 19th overall in 2003 after he wowed scouts with arm strength, including the infamous story about throwing a ball through the uprights from his knees. The Ravens believed they could develop him. The problem? They handed him that responsibility while fielding one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. The margin for error was thin. Boller blew through it. From 2003 to 2005, Boller went 20-17 as a starter, but that includes starts beyond 2005. Furthermore, those wins were almost entirely defense-driven. Individually, he was brutal. 48 touchdowns to 44 interceptions, never topping 60% completion in any season, and finishing his Ravens career with a career passer rating under 70. His biggest flaw was accuracy, not confidence or toughness. Short throws sailed. Intermediate routes died at receivers' feet. Drives constantly stalled because Baltimore couldn't trust him on 3rd down. The moments that defined Boller came in high-leverage situations. In Week 17 of the 2003 season, with a playoff berth on the line against Pittsburgh, Boller threw 3 interceptions, including a disastrous red zone pick that flipped the game and knocked Baltimore out of the postseason. Similar breakdowns followed in 2004 and 2005. Missed open receivers, forced throws into coverage, and turnovers that wasted elite defensive performances from Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs. By 2006, the Ravens had seen enough. They replaced him, later rebuilding the offense around defense-first football until finally landing stability years later. Bowler isn't remembered as the worst because he lacked effort. He's remembered because he wasted a championship-level roster, and in Baltimore, that's unforgivable. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Buffalo Bills, J.P. Losman, 2004 to 2007. J.P. Losman was drafted by the Buffalo Bills to end the post-Jim Kelly void. In 2004, the Bills traded up to number 22 overall to take him, believing his arm talent and mobility could modernize the offense. What they got was chaos. Losman's defining flaw showed up in his decision-making as situations tightened. He threw 33 touchdowns to 34 interceptions, never completed 60% of his passes in a season, and struggled to string together efficient games. The arm was real. He could make throws off-platform and push the ball downfield, but his internal clock was off. He held the ball too long, drifted into sacks, and forced throws late over the middle. Drives routinely died not because defenses dominated, but because Losman created negative plays out of clean looks. The plays fans remember came in close games Buffalo couldn't afford to lose. In 2006, Losman threw 10 interceptions in the first 9 games, including multiple red zone picks that flipped momentum instantly. Against New England late that season, he was intercepted 3 times, 2 of them on throws that never should have been attempted. By 2007, the Bills benched him permanently. The verdict was clear. Losman was too reckless to trust, and that kept Buffalo stuck in quarterback purgatory for years. Carolina Panthers, Jimmy Clausen, 2010. Jimmy Clausen's Panthers tenure is short, but it's historically damaging. Carolina drafted him in the second round of the 2010 NFL Draft after his high-profile Notre Dame career, believing he could be a long-term starter or at least stabilize the position. He ended up delivering one of the worst quarterback seasons of the modern era, on a team that was not even built to fail this hard. Clausen finished with 2 touchdowns to 9 interceptions in 2010, a passer rating of 58.4, and only 3.6 yards per attempt, numbers that barely function in the NFL. The offense was completely lifeless. Carolina averaged under 13 points per game in his starts, and defenses openly sat on short routes because Clausen couldn't punish coverage downfield. Clausen's biggest flaw was hesitation, not arm strength or mobility. He routinely double-clutched throws, missed open receivers, and checked the ball down even when trailing. Clausen didn't usually lose games with one spectacular mistake. He lost them by never making winning plays. Third and medium became punts. Red zone trips stalled. Against Arizona in Week 9, he threw 3 interceptions, 2 coming on late reads where defenders broke before the ball left his hand. By season's end, Carolina was 2-14, the worst record in the league. The fallout? That disaster season directly led to the Panthers drafting Cam Newton number 1 overall in 2011. Clausen did more than fail. He became the low point that forced a total reset. Chicago Bears, Cade McNown, 1999 to 2000. For the Bears, Cade McNown was more than a desperate start. He was a top 5 investment. The Bears traded for him after being drafted 12th overall in the 1999 NFL Draft by Cleveland after his prolific UCLA career, hoping he'd finally stabilize a franchise that had been searching for a quarterback since Jim McMahon, only for McNown to become a symbol of how fast confidence can collapse at the NFL level. On the field, the problems showed up immediately. In 15 starts with the Bears, McNown posted 16 touchdowns against 19 interceptions, but the raw numbers don't capture the real issue: game management. He routinely missed hot reads, drifted backward into trouble, and turned manageable situations into disasters. His footwork broke down under blitzes, leading to floating passes that linebackers jumped easily. The Bears' offense stalled not because it lacked weapons, but because drives kept dying on third down mistakes. Coaches openly questioned his preparation and leadership, and teammates reportedly lost confidence when plays unraveled. In Week 6 of the 2000 season versus Detroit, McNown turned the ball over 4 times through the air, several on late throws into zone coverage where defenders were waiting. That game was the breaking point. Chicago benched him soon after, and by the end of 2000, the Bears were done. In addition to failing to elevate the roster, McNown accelerated a rebuild and extended Chicago's quarterback drought well into the next decade. Cincinnati Bengals, Akili Smith, 1999 to 2002. Akili Smith is widely considered one of the most damaging draft decisions in NFL history. In 1999, the Bengals selected him 3rd overall, passing on multiple trade offers that could have reshaped the franchise. Smith had flashed briefly at Oregon and rocketed up draft boards. Cincinnati bet everything on upside. The bill came due immediately. Smith's NFL career never stabilized. His stat line read 5 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, completed barely 46% of his passes, and finished with a career passer rating of 52.8, numbers that are almost unplayable. The speed of the game overwhelmed him. He struggled with basic coverage recognition, routinely locked onto his first read, and panicked when defenses disguised blitzes. Throws arrived late or wildly off target, killing drives before they began. In 2000 versus Cleveland, Smith turned the ball over 4 times through the air, several on throws directly into zone defenders who never moved. Red zone trips became turnovers. 3rd downs became sacks or throwaways. By 2002, Cincinnati had given up. Smith was out of the league shortly after, and the real damage lingered. The Bengals lost years rebuilding from a pick that should have altered their future. Akili Smith did more than fail. He froze the franchise in place at the worst possible time. Cleveland Browns, Johnny Manziel, 2014 to 2015. Johnny Manziel was drafted to change Cleveland's identity. Taken 22nd overall in the 2014 NFL Draft, Manziel arrived with Heisman hype, national attention, and a franchise desperate for relevance. The Browns believed his improvisational brilliance would translate, only for it to expose everything Cleveland had cycled through for decades: instability, impatience, and chaos. On the field, Manziel never looked remotely ready. His stat line settled at 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, completed only 57% of his passes, and routinely failed to execute basic NFL structure. His college habits, drifting backwards, ignoring the pocket, hunting big plays, collapsed against pro defenses. He missed open receivers, bailed from clean pockets, and turned routine plays into negative ones. The offense couldn't function because Manziel didn't operate within it. What defined his tenure went beyond interceptions. They were situational disasters. In Week 17 of the 2015 season versus Pittsburgh, with the Browns trying to play spoiler, Manziel had 2 interceptions. One fired directly into coverage on a late out route, the other coming on a panicked throw while scrambling. That game encapsulated the problem. No growth, no command, no trust. Off-the-field issues only accelerated the downfall, and by the end of 2015, Cleveland moved on completely. Manziel not only failed to fix the Browns, he became another chapter in the quarterback carousel that defined the franchise's lost years. Dallas Cowboys, Quincy Carter, 2001 to 2003. Quincy Carter is remembered less for disaster plays and more for what Dallas never got. The Cowboys selected him in the 2nd round of the 2001 NFL Draft, hoping he'd develop into the next long-term starter after Troy Aikman. But Carter became the definition of a quarterback who hovered below competence, never bad enough to quit immediately, never good enough to trust. Statistically, Carter was shaky from the start. He had 40 touchdowns to 36 interceptions in 36 career starts, completed under 60% of his passes, and struggled mightily pushing the ball downfield. Carter's main issue as a quarterback was anticipation and accuracy. Routes broke open late, balls arrived later, and Dallas's offense constantly stalled because Carter couldn't punish coverage when defenses crowded the box. In 2003, with the Cowboys surprisingly in playoff contention, Carter led the NFL in interceptions, 21. Against Washington that season, he threw 3 picks, including a forced throw into double coverage that killed a comeback attempt. That year ended with a first-round playoff loss, and shortly after, Carter was released. The Cowboys not only move on, they reset the position entirely. Carter was more than a meltdown quarterback. He was the ceiling that kept Dallas from being dangerous, and that's why he landed here. Denver Broncos, Paxton Lynch, 2016 to 2017. Paxton Lynch might be the most jarring misread of quarterback readiness in Broncos history. Denver traded up in the first round of the 2016 NFL Draft, number 26 overall, to select him, months after winning Super Bowl 50. The idea was simple: plug a young quarterback into a championship-caliber roster and keep the window open. It didn't go according to plan. From the moment he stepped on the field, Lynch looked overwhelmed. He went 1-3, had 4 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, and completed only 59.1% of his passes. But the stats actually flatter him. The real issue was processing speed. He struggled with play calls, routinely got the team lined up late, burned timeouts, and looked unsure of where to go with the ball, even against basic coverages. Coaches questioned his preparation openly, a massive red flag for a first-round QB. In a Week 13 game versus Jacksonville in 2016, he repeatedly missed open receivers, took unnecessary sacks, and failed to execute simple reads in the red zone, turning a winnable game into a loss. By 2017, he had lost the locker room, fallen behind Trevor Siemian and Brock Osweiler, and was eventually cut outright. Denver's post-Peyton Manning quarterback spiral begins here. Lynch did more than fail. He wasted a Super Bowl roster and sent the franchise into years of instability. Detroit Lions, Joey Harrington, 2002 to 2005. Joey Harrington is one of the clearest cases of a quarterback being set up to fail, and still failing badly enough to define an era. Detroit drafted him 3rd overall in the 2002 NFL Draft, handing him the keys to a franchise that desperately needed a savior. He was smart, poised, and polished coming out of Oregon. The Lions believed he could lead a turnaround, but he went on to become the face of early 2000s Lions dysfunction. Harrington's time in Detroit saw him finish with an 18-37 record, throwing 60 touchdowns to 62 interceptions, with a career passer rating in the low 70s. The biggest issue was timing and decisiveness. Harrington hesitated on reads, double-clutched throws, and absorbed sacks that killed drives. When the game demanded precision, his mechanics broke down, passes sailed high, routes broke open late, and Detroit's offense stalled into predictable 3-and-outs. In 2005 versus Cincinnati, Harrington threw 4 interceptions, many on late throws over the middle where defenders were already breaking on the ball. Similar performances stacked up, and confidence drained fast, from fans, teammates, and eventually Harrington himself. By the end of 2005, Detroit moved on. Harrington was a tentative quarterback, and that tentativeness kept the Lions stuck in neutral during a stretch when they needed leadership most. Green Bay Packers, Anthony Dilweg, 1989 to 1990. Anthony Dilweg was drafted by Green Bay in 1989 and became the full-time starter during one of the darkest stretches in franchise history. From 1989 to 1990, Dilweg went 4-15 as a starter in 19 games. His production was brutal: 31 touchdown passes to 45 interceptions, consistently poor accuracy, and almost no ability to stretch the field. The offense stalled constantly, and Green Bay finished near the bottom of the league both seasons. What made Dilweg especially damaging was context. The Packers were already struggling as a franchise in the late 80s, and Dilweg's turnovers repeatedly buried a bad roster even deeper. His decision-making was slow, he forced throws into coverage, and he struggled to read defenses, issues that showed up every week. In 1990 alone, he managed 19 interceptions in only 11 starts, a back-breaking rate that ended any chance of competitiveness. Dilweg's tenure became symbolic of the pre-Favre Packers malaise, A reminder that Green Bay didn't always have elite quarterback play. Once Brett Favre arrived in 1992, the franchise flipped overnight, making Dillweg's era stand out even more as rock bottom. Houston Texans, David Carr, 2002 to 2006. David Carr is the textbook example of a quarterback broken by circumstance, and that still counts. Houston selected him first overall in the 2002 NFL Draft, the face of an expansion franchise, and asked him to lead immediately behind one of the worst offensive lines the league has ever seen. Carr took an astonishing 249 sacks in 5 seasons, including an NFL record 76 sacks in 2002 alone. But sacks weren't the only problem. Carr's internal clock never recovered. He began holding the ball too long, drifting backward in the pocket, and missing quick throws that could have saved drives. Statistically, he finished his Texans career with 59 touchdowns to 65 interceptions, and only 1 season with a passer rating above league average. The moment did more than beat him. It trained him to play scared. Carr routinely passed up open underneath routes, waited for deeper concepts to develop, and got crushed before pulling the trigger. In 2005 versus Seattle, he took 9 sacks in 1 game, many on plays where the ball needed to come out immediately. By the time Houston finally built a functional roster, Carr's confidence was gone. The Texans moved on in 2007. Carr didn't fail because he lacked talent. He failed because he was asked to survive rather than develop, and the franchise paid years for it. Indianapolis Colts, Curtis Painter, 2010 to 2011. The Colts selected Curtis Painter in the 6th round of the 2009 NFL Draft as a developmental backup behind Peyton Manning. But when Manning's neck injury wiped out the 2011 season, Painter was suddenly asked to pilot a roster built entirely around elite quarterback play. The result was one of the steepest single-season drop-offs in NFL history. Painter went 0-8 as a starter in 8 games, throwing 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions with a passer rating hovering in the mid-60s. The offense collapsed. Timing routes disappeared. Red zone efficiency vanished. Painter struggled most with anticipation and pocket feel. He threw to open receivers, not into windows, which allowed NFL defenses to close those windows instantly. Even basic play-action concepts fell apart because defenses had zero fear of him pushing the ball downfield. Painter's missteps repeatedly drained momentum. In Week 1 versus Houston, Painter finished with 3 interceptions, including a late throw across the field that was easily jumped by a linebacker. Similar mistakes followed week after week: late outs, forced balls into zone coverage, and sacks taken on plays where the ball had to come out immediately. Indianapolis finished 2-14, and the fallout was seismic. The collapse directly led to the Colts holding the #1 pick and drafting Andrew Luck in 2012. Painter was more than overmatched. He exposed how fragile the entire structure was without an elite quarterback. Jacksonville Jaguars, Blaine Gabbert, 2011 to 2013. Blaine Gabbert was supposed to be the reset button. Jacksonville traded up in the 2011 NFL Draft to select him 10th overall, believing his size, arm talent, and college production at Missouri could anchor a rebuild. He ended up becoming the face of a stretch where the Jaguars' offense simply couldn't function. Gabbert finished with a 5-22 record in 27 games, throwing 22 touchdowns to 24 interceptions and completing 57% of his passes. Gabbert's biggest issue was fear-driven decision-making, not arm strength. Gabbert developed happy feet almost immediately. Even from clean pockets, he rushed throws, faded backward, or bailed early, turning routine plays into checkdowns or throwaways. Jacksonville's offense became painfully predictable because defenses knew he wouldn't stand in and attack. He completed only 15 passes for 124 yards in 2011 versus the Jets, missing open receivers repeatedly on 3rd down. Throughout 2012, he ranked near the bottom of the league in yards per attempt, often checking the ball down on 3rd and long with no chance to convert. Red zone trips stalled because he hesitated on tight window throws. By 2013, the Jaguars benched him permanently. Gabbert not only struggled, he drained all aggression out of the offense, leaving Jacksonville stuck in neutral until the position was reset again. Kansas City Chiefs, Tyler Palko, 2011. An undrafted free agent, Palko was thrust into the lineup during the 2011 season after injuries and ineffectiveness wiped out the Chiefs' depth chart. What followed was a short run that made it painfully clear how low the floor can be at quarterback. Palko made 4 starts in 2011 and went 1-3, throwing 1 passing touchdown in 2011 and 4 interceptions, with a passer rating in the low 50s. The offense essentially shut down. Kansas City averaged under 10 points per game in his starts, and defenses crowded the line of scrimmage because there was zero fear of the ball going downfield. Palko struggled most with arm strength and timing. Throws arrived late and floated, giving defenders time to break. On Monday Night Football versus Pittsburgh, Palko completed only 18 of 35 passes, finished with 3 interceptions, and repeatedly missed open receivers on 3rd down. Several picks were the result of underthrown balls that defensive backs simply waited on. That game ended his run almost immediately. The Chiefs benched him, revamped the position the following offseason, and never looked back. In addition to being ineffective, Palko was unplayable, and his brief tenure forced Kansas City to confront how fragile the offense had become. Las Vegas Raiders, Jamarcus Russell, 2007 to 2009. Jamarcus Russell is more than the Raiders' worst quarterback. He's the benchmark for draft failure. Oakland selected him 1st overall in the 2007 NFL Draft, betting on rare arm strength and size to revive a declining franchise. The expectations were massive, the contract was enormous, and the margin for error was 0. Almost immediately, everything went wrong. On the field, Russell was erratic and unprepared. He went 7-18, throwing 18 touchdowns to 23 interceptions, with a completion rate under 53%. The problems were foundational: poor footwork, late reads, and a complete lack of consistency. He could throw the ball 70 yards and miss a 5-yard slant. Drives stalled because the offense never stayed on schedule, and coaches visibly simplified game plans to survive possessions. Russell's problems showed up both technically and situationally. He routinely missed open receivers on basic concepts, floated passes into coverage, and failed to recognize blitzes. In 2009 versus Kansas City, he had 3 interceptions, 2 on throws that came out late and hung in the air. By the end of that season, Oakland had seen enough. Russell was released. His guarantees became a cautionary tale, and the Raiders were set back years. This was more than bad quarterback play. It was organizational damage, the kind that lingers long after the player is gone. Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Leaf, 1998 to 2000. Ryan Leaf is the archetype for how fast a franchise gamble can implode. Selected 2nd overall in the 1998 NFL Draft, right behind Peyton Manning, Leaf arrived with elite arm talent and enormous expectations. On the field, Leaf never stabilized. In 10 starts, he went 2-8, throwing 14 interceptions to only 14 touchdowns, completing 48% of his passes, and posting a career passer rating in the low 50s. His biggest issues were decision-making and accuracy under pressure. Reads were late, mechanics unraveled, and simple concepts turned into turnover opportunities. Defensive backs jumped routes because the ball arrived slow or off target, and drives died early and often. In Week 1 of the 1998 season versus Kansas City, Leaf finished with 4 interceptions, fumbled twice, and had a passer rating of 0.0, one of the worst single-game QB performances ever. The mental side deteriorated quickly. Visible frustration, sideline blow-ups, and a loss of trust from coaches and teammates. By 2000, the Chargers moved on. Leaf not only failed to meet expectations, he reset the franchise's timeline and became the cautionary tale every team cites when debating traits versus readiness. Los Angeles Rams, Keith Null, 2009. Keith Null's NFL career was short, but his impact on the Rams' history is brutal. Drafted in the 6th round of the 2009 NFL Draft, Null was never supposed to be more than a developmental backup. Injuries and dysfunction pushed him into the starting role during one of the worst seasons in modern NFL history. Null appeared in 6 games in 2009 and went 0-6, throwing 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions with a passer rating under 60. The Rams' offense completely collapsed during his starts, averaging under 11 points per game. Null struggled most with arm strength and anticipation. Throws arrived late, deep routes died in the air, and defenses crowded the line of scrimmage because they knew he couldn't threaten them vertically. Null was limited, not reckless, as evident in a Week 12 game versus Chicago, where he repeatedly underthrew receivers on intermediate routes, leading to interceptions where defensive backs barely had to move. 3rd downs became automatic stops for defenses, and red zone trips ended with stalled drives or turnovers. By season's end, the Rams were 1-15, and Null was never trusted as a starter again. Despite not being a long-term disaster, Null symbolized how completely broken the franchise had become at that moment. Miami Dolphins, Dante Culpepper, 2006. Dante Culpepper's Miami stint hurts because of what it replaced. In 2006, the Dolphins chose Culpepper over Drew Brees, believing Culpepper's size and arm would bounce back after a knee injury. The expectation was not only competence, it was franchise stability. Culpepper appeared in 4 games for the Dolphins in 2006 and went 0-4, throwing 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions with a passer rating in the mid-70s that masked deeper problems. The knee clearly limited him. His base collapsed when things sped up, velocity dipped, and timing routes arrived late. Miami's offense became static because Culpepper couldn't consistently drive the ball outside the numbers or escape collapsing pockets. Against Pittsburgh in Week 6, Culpepper repeatedly held the ball, took sacks on plays that demanded quick throws, and missed open receivers breaking on schedule. By midseason, Miami benched him, and the season spiraled to 1-15. The fallout is the story. Passing on Brees set the franchise back years. Culpepper was more than ineffective. His signing marked a fork in the road Miami chose incorrectly. Minnesota Vikings, Christian Ponder, 2011 to 2013. Christian Ponder represents a quarterback drafted out of fear, not conviction. Minnesota selected him 12th overall in the 2011 NFL Draft, reaching early because they were desperate to stabilize the position. The expectation was efficiency and growth, not superstardom. What followed was an offense that constantly capped itself. Ponder played 36 games over 3 seasons, finishing with a 14-21 record, 38 touchdowns to 36 interceptions, and a career passer rating in the low 70s. His biggest flaw was processing speed. He struggled to read full field progressions, often locking onto his first option and checking the ball down when it was not immediately available. Defenses quickly realized they could crowd the box without punishment, shrinking the field and suffocating Minnesota's offense. Ponder's shortcomings were amplified in high-stakes games, as was the case in the 2012 season. With the playoffs on the line against Green Bay, Ponder completed 14 passes only and failed to capitalize on favorable looks generated by Adrian Peterson's historic season. Missed reads and late throws killed drives, and Minnesota's postseason hopes ended abruptly. By 2013, the Vikings moved on. Ponder didn't implode spectacularly. He limited the ceiling of a roster that was otherwise built to compete. New England Patriots, Mac Jones, 2021 to 2023. Mac Jones is here not because he was immediately awful, but because the fall was fast and damaging. Drafted 15th overall in 2021, Jones was supposed to be the clean, efficient successor in a system that made quarterbacks look smart. His rookie year reinforced that belief. By year 3, the experiment had collapsed. Over 40 games in New England, Jones went 18-24, while throwing 46 touchdowns against 36 interceptions. The central problem was how his play regressed when the game sped up. Once defenses adjusted, Jones struggled to process post-snap looks, panicked when his first read was taken away, and forced throws late over the middle. His mechanics deteriorated when hurried, leading to floaters and back foot passes that defensive backs sat on. In 2022, during a Monday Night Football matchup versus Chicago, Jones was intercepted twice, including a red zone pick where he stared down the route the entire way. In 2023, frustration boiled over. Visible sideline outbursts, miscommunications, and turnovers at the worst moments. By midseason, the Patriots benched him multiple times. This went beyond a quarterback failing. It was the first time the Patriots system failed publicly, and Jones became the symbol of the post-Brady identity crisis. New Orleans Saints, Aaron Brooks, 2001 to 2005. Aaron Brooks is remembered in New Orleans as the quarterback who could look brilliant one week and unplayable the next. Acquired in 2000 and named the starter in 2001, Brooks was given a real opportunity to lead the Saints after years of instability at the position. The talent was there. The consistency never arrived. In 73 starts, Brooks posted 123 touchdowns against 92 interceptions, but those numbers hide the real problem: timing and decision-making in critical moments. Brooks had a strong arm and mobility, yet pocket awareness and situational football consistently failed him. He prioritized flash over function, particularly when the pressure intensified. In 2003 against Jacksonville, Brooks had 4 interceptions, none bigger than a late-game pick that came from forcing a cross-field throw with a slim lead to protect. Similar mistakes followed year after year: late reads, back foot throws, and interceptions that instantly flipped games. Despite some playoff success early, the Saints eventually moved on, realizing Brooks's volatility made sustained success impossible. New Orleans has had other least talented quarterbacks, but Brooks was the one they could never fully trust. New York Giants, Dave Brown, 1992 to 1995. Dave Brown is remembered as the quarterback who derailed the Giants' post-Super Bowl momentum. Selected in the first round of the 1992 supplemental draft, Brown was handed the job immediately after Phil Simms' era ended. Brown's 43-game stretch ended with an 18-25 record and a 33-46 touchdown-to-interception line. His biggest flaw was accuracy under pressure. Brown failed to throw receivers open, often delivering passes late or behind targets. Defenses crowded short routes, daring him to beat them deep, and he rarely could. Drives bogged down because third-down conversions disappeared. In 1994 versus Philadelphia, Brown was intercepted 5 times in one game, several on forced throws into zone coverage where defenders were sitting on routes. That performance became emblematic of his tenure: poor reads, forced balls, and zero rhythm. By 1995, the Giants moved on. Brown failed to replace Simms. He extended the franchise's offensive drought, forcing a reset at quarterback. New York Jets, Zach Wilson, 2021 to 2023. Zach Wilson was drafted to save the New York Jets franchise. The Jets took him second overall in the 2021 NFL Draft, betting on arm talent, off-platform throws, and upside. The expectation was growth through mistakes. Wilson went 12-21 in 33 starts, throwing 23 touchdowns to 25 interceptions, with a passer rating hovering in the low 70s. The core problem was processing speed. Wilson consistently missed the middle of the field, failed to recognize basic coverages, and bailed from clean pockets. His mechanics unraveled under pressure, drifting backward, throwing off his back foot, and sailing routine throws. The offense shrank because coaches couldn't trust him to execute on schedule. Wilson's defining moments came when wins were required. That showed in 2022 against New England, when 3 interceptions, capped by a late red zone pick, decided the game. Weeks later, after a loss to the Patriots, he infamously failed to take accountability in a post-game press conference, a moment that fractured the locker room. By 2023, The Jets benched him multiple times despite a playoff-caliber defense. Wilson undermined a roster that was ready to win, making his tenure one of the most damaging in Jets history. Philadelphia Eagles. Mike McMahon, 2005. Mike McMahon's Eagles stint is brief, but it's unforgettable for how sharply the offense collapsed when he was on the field. A former fifth-round pick, McMahon was pressed into action during the 2005 season when injuries forced him into starting on a team still trying to contend in the post-Super Bowl era. With Mike McMahon, the expectation was survival, not greatness, and he couldn't provide that. During his 5-game run in 2005, McMahon went 2-5, throwing 5 touchdowns against 7 interceptions with a sub-65 passer rating. The biggest issue was arm strength and timing. Deep outs and intermediate routes arrived late, allowing defensive backs to break easily. Philadelphia's offense became condensed because defenses had no reason to respect the boundaries or the deep middle. Against Dallas in Week 10, McMahon was picked 3 times for interceptions, including a late throw into zone coverage that was picked off cleanly and returned deep into Eagles territory. Drives died because throws were either late or underthrown, and Andy Reid was forced to drastically simplify the playbook. Once Donovan McNabb returned, McMahon disappeared from the rotation. His short run stands out because it showed how quickly a functional offense can completely shut down without adequate quarterback play. Pittsburgh Steelers. Mark Malone, 1980 to 1987. Mark Malone had the unenviable task of following Terry Bradshaw, and that context matters. Drafted in the first round in 1980, Malone was expected to usher the Steelers into their next era after a dynasty. Malone's 47 starts with Pittsburgh resulted in a 19-28 record, with 41 touchdowns against 53 interceptions. The core issue was decision-making under pressure. Malone had adequate arm talent, but his reads were late and his ball placement inconsistent. He failed to anticipate windows, which led to passes arriving a beat slow. NFL defenses punished that relentlessly. Drives stalled because the offense couldn't stay on schedule, and turnovers routinely flipped field position. In 1984 versus Miami, the defense picked him 4 times for interceptions. He had several forced throws against zone coverage where defenders were sitting on routes. Similar performances dotted his tenure, and confidence never fully returned, neither from coaches nor teammates. By the mid-80s, Pittsburgh cycled quarterbacks again, realizing Malone was not the bridge to the future. Malone's major issue was that he couldn't sustain competence, not that he was catastrophically bad, and for a franchise built on stability, that was the ultimate failure. San Francisco 49ers. J.T. O'Sullivan, 2008. J.T. O'Sullivan's season with the 49ers is remembered because it marked rock bottom before the rebuild. Brought in as a low-cost stopgap, he unexpectedly won the starting job in 2008 for a team already searching for identity. The expectation was basic functionality, and even that proved out of reach. In 8 appearances, O'Sullivan went 2-6 with 11 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and a mid-70s passer rating that hid deeper flaws. The offense was chaotic. His biggest flaw was pocket awareness. He failed to diagnose pressure, waited too long, and let his pocket movement work against him. In addition to having bad protection at San Francisco, O'Sullivan routinely made things worse by missing hot reads and late checking protections. Sullivan's defining errors came in clusters. In Week 7 versus the Giants, O'Sullivan had 3 interceptions, including a red zone pick where he stared down the route and never saw the safety rotate. Drives collapsed because mistakes stacked back-to-back, a sack, then a forced throw, then a turnover. By mid-season, the 49ers benched him, and the franchise began its slow pivot toward rebuilding the quarterback room. O'Sullivan was more than ineffective. He symbolized a team without answers at the most important position. Seattle Seahawks. Charlie Whitehurst, 2010 to 2011. Charlie Whitehurst's Seahawks tenure is remembered less for catastrophe and more for missed opportunity. Acquired from San Diego and nicknamed Clipboard Jesus, Whitehurst was viewed as a potential upside play, a quarterback who needed reps. When he finally got them in 2010 to 2011, Seattle learned why he hadn't played. Whitehurst went 1-3, throwing 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, with a passer rating in the mid-60s. The offense sputtered because of indecision. Whitehurst couldn't diagnose coverage pre-snap, hesitated on reads, and missed timing routes that the system depended on. His footwork deteriorated under pressure, leading to off-target throws on simple concepts. Whitehurst's defining errors came in games Seattle needed to stay afloat. In Week 6 of the 2010 season versus Chicago, Whitehurst had 2 interceptions, both on late throws over the middle, where defenders broke before the ball arrived. Similar issues followed in 2011, and the Seahawks quickly pivoted away from the experiment. Whitehurst showed that potential without processing speed doesn't survive NFL defenses. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Josh Freeman, 2009 to 2013. Josh Freeman is one of the strangest quarterback collapses of the modern era, because, for a moment, it actually worked. Drafted 17th overall in 2009, Freeman showed real promise early, big arm, mobility, and a 25-touchdown season in 2010 that convinced Tampa Bay they had their guy. That belief is exactly why this ended so badly. From 2011 onward, everything unraveled. Freeman lacked accuracy, preparation, and consistency, finishing his Buccaneers career with 80 touchdowns to 66 interceptions and a passer rating that steadily declined. His mechanics broke down under pressure. Balls sailed high, short throws skipped at receivers' feet, and timing routes died because he was late pulling the trigger. The offense became wildly unpredictable, explosive one drive, completely broken the next. The defining moment came in Week 4 of the 2013 season versus Arizona, one of the worst quarterback performances ever recorded. Freeman went 22 of 48 for 125 yards, 1 interception, lost a fumble, and his passer rating was 30.2. He missed open receivers repeatedly and looked disconnected from the offense. Within weeks, Tampa Bay benched him and cut ties entirely. Freeman not only regressed, he lost the trust of coaches and teammates, turning early promise into one of the most frustrating QB eras the franchise has had. Tennessee Titans, Jake Locker, 2011 to 2014. Jake Locker was drafted on projection, not polish. Tennessee took him 8th overall in the 2011 NFL Draft, fully aware he was raw, but convinced his athleticism and arm strength would eventually translate. The plan was patience. The problem was that Locker never stayed healthy long enough, or consistent enough, to grow. Locker's 4-season stretch covered 23 games and ended with a 9-14 record and a 27-22 touchdown-to-interception line. The biggest issue was accuracy and durability. His mechanics varied snap to snap, especially on short and intermediate throws, leading to balls sailing high or skipping low. When pressured, his footwork collapsed and timing routes broke down. Even when the offense moved, it felt fragile, one hit or one bad series away from falling apart. In 2013 versus San Francisco, Locker threw 2 interceptions on late reads while trying to force throws against zone coverage, turning a competitive game into a loss. Injuries piled up, confidence eroded, and by 2014, the Titans moved on. Locker was never reliable, and that unreliability kept Tennessee stuck in limbo at quarterback. Washington Commanders, Dwayne Haskins, 2019 to 2020. Dwayne Haskins was drafted to be the reset. Washington selected him 15th overall in the 2019 NFL Draft, hoping his big arm and record-setting college production at Ohio State would finally stabilize a franchise stuck in quarterback chaos. Haskins' 13 starts over 2 seasons ended with a 3-10 record and a 12-14 touchdown-to-interception line. Protections broke down under his control, routinely missed pre-snap indicators, and held the ball too long waiting for receivers to come open. When pressure arrived, his footwork broke down, leading to late throws and interceptions over the middle. The offense stalled because coaches couldn't trust him to operate the full playbook. Haskins' errors were both on-field and situational. In 2020 against Baltimore, Haskins' 3-interception outing ended with a late mistake, forcing a throw into coverage when the checkdown was there. Weeks later, repeated turnovers, missed reads, and questions about preparation led Washington to bench him and eventually release him before the season ended. Haskins did more than struggle. He became another quarterback Washington had to abandon early, extending a cycle of instability that defined the franchise for years. Arizona Cardinals, Carson Palmer. Heading into 2013, the Arizona Cardinals were stuck in quarterback purgatory. Kevin Kolb had failed, the offense had no identity, and a talented defense was being wasted. Arizona sent a 2013 6th-round pick and a conditional 2014 7th-round pick, and also swapped picks to receive Oakland's 2013 7th-rounder in the deal for Carson Palmer, a quarterback most people had already written off. On paper, Palmer was viewed as immobile, aging, and damaged by years behind bad offensive lines in Cincinnati and Oakland. The price reflected that skepticism. This was a low-risk, high-need move. Palmer delivered the best quarterback stretch in Cardinals history. Under Bruce Arians, he thrived in a vertical offense, peaking in 2015 when he threw 35 touchdowns, earned MVP votes, tied for second in AP voting, and led Arizona to a 13-3 record. His defining moment came in the 2015 divisional round versus Green Bay, where he repeatedly attacked downfield and set up Larry Fitzgerald's iconic overtime touchdown. Palmer took the Cardinals to the NFC Championship game, something the franchise had rarely experienced. That move bought Arizona relevance and its clearest Super Bowl window. Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones. Entering the 2011 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons were already built to win. Matt Ryan was established as the franchise quarterback, the roster had proven it could reach the playoffs, and expectations were shifting from contention to championships. Atlanta lacked a true game-breaking presence on offense, someone who could bend coverage, dictate matchups, and tilt the field every snap. Rather than settling for incremental improvement, the Falcons made one of the boldest draft day moves of the modern era. They traded 5 draft picks to Cleveland to jump up to number 6 overall and select Julio Jones. The cost was enormous, especially for a wide receiver, and criticism came immediately. The logic was simple but aggressive. Atlanta wasn't chasing draft value or roster balance. They were chasing dominance, betting that one elite weapon could change the ceiling of the entire franchise. Julio Jones justified that bet almost instantly. From his first seasons in the NFL, he turned into the most physically overwhelming receiver in football. Too strong to jam at the line, too fast for safeties, and impossible to cover one-on-one. Defensive game plans shifted around him before the snap, often sacrificing coverage elsewhere just to survive his presence. He led the NFL in receiving yards twice, routinely producing massive performances without needing excessive targets, and his gravity unlocked the Falcons' passing attack, elevating Matt Ryan and turning Atlanta into a weekly matchup nightmare. That impact reached its peak during the 2016 season and culminated on the sport's biggest stage. While protecting a late lead during Super Bowl 51, Julio made one of the greatest catches in Super Bowl history, a sideline toe-tap grab that required flawless timing, balance, and control. The play should have sealed a championship. Even in defeat, it crystallized Julio's legacy, not just production, but inevitability. Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. Going into the 2018 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens were quietly approaching a turning point. Joe Flacco was still on the roster, but his decline was evident. The offense had grown rigid, explosive plays were rare, and his contract limited roster flexibility. Internally, Baltimore understood the franchise's championship window was closing. What they needed was not a short-term fix, but a pathway into a new era. That opportunity appeared as Lamar Jackson, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, inexplicably slid down draft boards. Despite elite production and jaw-dropping athleticism at Louisville, teams fixated on perceived flaws, unconventional mechanics, questions about accuracy, and even debates about whether he should change positions. While other franchises hesitated or overthought the evaluation, Baltimore remained patient, watching value fall into reach. When Jackson dropped to the end of the first round, the Ravens acted decisively. They traded back into pick number 32 with Philadelphia, sending a package of mid-round selections to secure Jackson, and critically, a fifth-year option. This was a calculated gamble. Baltimore were not looking for or drafting an immediate Flacco replacement or a plug-and-play quarterback. They were betting on a complete offensive transformation built around speed, spacing, and schematic stress rather than traditional structure. That bet paid off almost instantly. Jackson took over late in his rookie season, led the Ravens to the playoffs, and gave everyone else a preview of something entirely different. The evolution came to a head in 2019 when he won NFL MVP, guided Baltimore to a 14-2 record, and delivered one of the most dominant seasons ever by a quarterback. Lamar Jackson's statement moment came on Monday Night Football against the Rams, when he dismantled the NFL's most respected defense with 5 touchdown passes. Buffalo Bills, Tom Cousino, assets to Jim Kelly. By early 1980s, the Buffalo Bills were a franchise drifting without direction. They lacked star power, national relevance, and, most critically, a quarterback capable of elevating the organization. Linebacker Tom Cousino was one of Buffalo's most valuable assets, and instead of clinging to short-term respectability, the Bills used that value strategically. Buffalo traded Cousino and stockpiled draft picks across multiple seasons, a quiet maneuver that drew little attention in the eyes of the league. Buffalo used the Cousino situation to stockpile leverage and picks in an era when they desperately needed a franchise QB. That positioned them to take Jim Kelly in 1983, and then to wait out his USFL detour until he arrived in 1986. But the plan hit an immediate obstacle. Kelly chose the United States Football League, signing with the Houston Gamblers instead of joining the NFL. Many teams would have panicked or moved on. Buffalo didn't. They held Kelly's rights, confident that patience, not urgency, would pay off. When Kelly finally arrived in Buffalo in 1986, he didn't ease into the role. He seized control of the franchise. He evolved into the unquestioned leader of the offense and the architect of the K-Gun, a no-huddle system built on tempo, precision, and relentless pressure. Defenses weren't just beaten, they were worn down, forced to defend at a pace they couldn't sustain. Buffalo transformed almost overnight from an afterthought into the most feared team in the AFC. That dominance was undeniable from 1990 to 1993, when Kelly led the Bills to 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, an accomplishment unmatched in NFL history. While the losses often overshadow the era, Buffalo ruled the conference, highlighted by a 51-3 demolition of the Raiders in the 1990 AFC Championship game. Kelly's arm strength, toughness, and command of the offense made the Bills a nightmare matchup. Carolina Panthers, Greg Olsen. Heading into 2011, the Chicago Bears made a move that barely caused a ripple back them, but would end up reshaping another franchise. They traded Greg Olsen to the Carolina Panthers for a 2012 third-round pick, effectively moving on from a player they never fully maximized. He was a miscast in Chicago, used more as a complementary piece than the matchup weapon his skill set allowed him to be. The Bears saw a tight end. Carolina saw something much bigger. The Panthers believed Olsen's true value was intelligence, route precision, and defensive awareness. He could diagnose coverages mid-route, adjust on the fly, and become a reliable outlet when plays broke down. With this acquisition, Carolina wanted structure and stability for an offense built around physicality and improvisation. While the deal drew little national attention, internally, the Panthers viewed Olsen as a foundational piece, not a luxury. Once in Carolina, Olsen established himself as indispensable almost immediately, especially as Cam Newton emerged as one of NFL's most dynamic quarterbacks. When defenses collapsed the pocket or erased primary reads, Olsen became Newton's security blanket, the player he trusted to be in the right spot at the right time. From 2014 to 2016, Olsen posted 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, a near unprecedented achievement for a tight end, built on elite route running, spatial awareness, and flawless timing rather than gimmicks or broken plays. That impact peaked during Carolina's 2015 Super Bowl run. Against Seattle in the divisional round, Olsen delivered multiple clutch receptions that sustained drives and punished defenses for overcommitting to stop the run. When opponents loaded the box to contain Newton and the Panthers' power rushing attack, Olsen emerged as the release valve that kept the offense balanced and functional. For the cost of a mid-round pick, in addition to filling a position, Carolina gained reliability, leadership, and offensive clarity. Chicago Bears. Dick Butkus pick. By the mid-1960s, the Chicago Bears weren't simply trying to add talent. They were fighting to preserve an identity. Defense had always defined the franchise, and as the NFL began shifting toward more modern, offense-driven football, Chicago made a deliberate choice to anchor itself to what it believed in. Chicago acquired a 1965 first-rounder from Pittsburgh by trading away a 1964 second-rounder and fourth-rounder to secure the 1965 first-round selection used to draft Dick Butkus. Butkus was already regarded as an elite collegiate defender, but even that reputation undersold what was coming. Chicago were trading for intimidation, intelligence, and total control of the middle of the field. From his first snap, Butkus enforced defense. He hit with violence, stripped the ball with purpose, and patrolled sideline to sideline with a speed and awareness that redefined the middle linebacker position. Offenses quickly learned that avoiding Butkus was part of the game plan, and often discovered it didn't matter. Quarterbacks hesitated longer. Running backs lowered their heads earlier. His strip tackles turned out to be his signature moments, turning routine plays into sudden momentum swings. Even in an era with limited television exposure, his reputation spread across conferences. Fear traveled faster than highlights. Despite playing on Bears teams that rarely contended for championships, Butkus established himself as a Hall of Fame icon and the purest embodiment of Chicago football. He wasn't remembered for rings or playoff runs. He was remembered for presence, dominance, and fear. That trade did 2 things. It delivered a great player, and it crystallized the Bears' philosophy. Defense first, toughness always. Cincinnati Bengals. James Brooks. By the early 1980s, the Cincinnati Bengals were searching for offensive flexibility in a league that still treated running backs as one-dimensional power players. The San Diego Chargers had James Brooks, a versatile but underutilized weapon whose skill set didn't fully align with their system. Cincinnati saw opportunity where San Diego saw redundancy, believing Brooks could unlock a different kind of offensive ceiling. The Bengals acquired Brooks in a low-profile trade that barely registered nationally. There was no star power attached, no immediate sense of impact. But Cincinnati's coaching staff had a specific vision. Brooks was more than a runner. He was a space player. The goal was reimagining how a running back could stress defenses both horizontally and vertically at a time when most schemes weren't built to handle that kind of versatility. Once in Cincinnati, Brooks turned into one of the most innovative offensive weapons of his era. He motioned out wide, ran receiver-quality routes, and routinely forced linebackers into coverage mismatches they couldn't survive. During an era dominated by power football, Brooks brought creativity and unpredictability. His impact peaked during the Bengals' run to Super Bowl 23, where he served as a constant pressure point in an offense built on balance, deception, and tempo. What made Brooks special wasn't just production. Timing and influence were big with him. His presence forced defenses to declare coverages early, opened space for the run game, and kept Cincinnati's offense adaptable week to week. Long before pass-catching running backs was central to modern offenses, James Brooks was already executing that role at a high level. Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson. By the time the Cleveland Browns entered the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes in 2022, the franchise was acting under the weight of history. Decades of quarterback instability had defined Cleveland's modern era, even as the roster around the position had finally become playoff caliber. The Browns believed they were no longer rebuilding, they were one quarterback away, and that belief pushed them toward an all-in decision rooted in both desperation and conviction. Cleveland sent an unprecedented haul to the Houston Texans: 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and additional mid-round selections, then followed it with a fully guaranteed contract that reset the quarterback market. No team had ever committed that level of draft capital and financial security to a single player. The move was aggressive, controversial, and polarizing, signaling that Cleveland was done with half measures. On the field, the gamble was rooted in Watson's proven ceiling. Before off-field issues interrupted his trajectory, he was one of NFL's most dynamic quarterbacks, combining elite pocket poise with rare improvisational ability. He punished pressure, routinely turning broken plays into explosive gains. His peak came during the 2020 season when he led the NFL in passing yards despite playing on a struggling Texans roster, consistently elevating the offense around him. For Cleveland, the trade represented hope wrapped in risk. Watson symbolized escape, a chance to finally stabilize the most important position in professional sports after decades of churn. Whether the move is ultimately remembered as bold or reckless, its significance is undeniable. Dallas Cowboys. Herschel Walker. Heading into 1989, the Dallas Cowboys were at absolute rock bottom. They were coming off a disastrous season, had just hired Jimmy Johnson, and were beginning a full teardown of a broken roster. The only true star left was Herschel Walker, a dominant, marketable running back in his prime, and easily the most valuable asset the franchise possessed. To most teams, Walker was the player you build around. To Dallas, he was leveraged. The Minnesota Vikings believed Walker was the final piece needed to push them into Super Bowl contention, and they paid accordingly. Dallas sent Walker to Minnesota in exchange for a massive package of players and draft picks spread across 3 drafts, with one crucial wrinkle. The Cowboys could convert many of those players into additional draft selections. Back then, the deal was widely criticized. Dallas appeared to be giving up the best player in the trade. The reality was sacrificing short-term production for complete control over their future. The real impact of the trade didn't arrive in a single season. It unfolded over years of sustained dominance. The draft capital acquired from Minnesota helped build the core of a dynasty, including Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, alongside an elite offensive line and Michael Irvin. From 1992 to 1995, Dallas won 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, overpowering every team in the NFL with balance, physicality, and star talent. Smith emerged as the defining postseason runner of his era, while Aikman delivered precision performances on the biggest stages, including Super Bowl MVP honors. Unlike most famous trades, this one didn't create a single iconic highlight. It created an era, championships, Lombardi trophies, a dynasty that forced the entire league to rethink how draft capital was valued. No trade in NFL history has produced more sustained success or reshaped team-building philosophy more dramatically. Denver Broncos. John Elway. In 1983, John Elway was the most coveted quarterback prospect the NFL had seen in years, and he made one thing clear: he would not play for the Baltimore Colts, who held the #1 overall pick. Elway publicly threatened to pursue a professional baseball career rather than join a dysfunctional franchise, using leverage few prospects had ever possessed. That stance forced Baltimore into a corner and created a rare opening for a team bold enough to act. The Denver Broncos recognized the opportunity immediately. Rather than waiting for draft day chaos, Denver negotiated directly with the Colts, sending a package of players and a future first-round pick in exchange for Elway's rights. This was a daring move at the time, given that it happened in an era when teams were conservative with draft capital. Denver wasn't just acquiring a quarterback. They were securing relevance, credibility, and a foundation to build around before Elway had taken a single NFL snap. Elway not only justified the trade, he carried it for nearly 2 decades. From the moment he arrived, the Broncos emerged as perennial contenders, with Elway leading Denver to 5 Super Bowl appearances. Early in his career, he became synonymous with late-game comebacks, fourth-quarter drives, and fearless downfield throws, often dragging undermanned rosters deep into the playoffs through arm strength, toughness, and sheer will. Even when Denver lost on the biggest stage, Elway's presence kept the franchise competitive year after year. The defining moment of his legacy came late, in Super Bowl 32. At 37 years old, with his career nearing its end, Elway scrambled for a critical first down and launched himself into contact in the iconic helicopter dive, a play that embodied toughness, sacrifice, and refusal to yield. Denver won its first Super Bowl and followed it with another championship the next season, finally rewriting Elway's narrative. Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford. By the end of the 2020 season, both the Detroit Lions and Matthew Stafford had reached the same conclusion. The time to move on was now. Stafford had given Detroit everything he had: toughness, elite arm talent, and countless comeback wins. But the franchise remained trapped in a cycle of competitiveness without real contention. Rather than prolonging a situation that no longer served either side, the Lions chose clarity over sentiment and committed to a clean break. By the end of January 2021, Detroit sent Stafford to the Los Angeles Rams in exchange for Jared Goff, a 2021 third-round pick, and first-round picks in 2022 and 2023. This move is viewed as one of the most consequential quarterback trades in league history, not just because of the talent involved, but because of what it signaled. Detroit wasn't chasing short-term relevance anymore. They were fully committing to a long-term rebuild, prioritizing flexibility, draft capital, and organizational reset over clinging to a familiar star. The impact of the trade revealed itself in layers. The draft picks turned into foundational players who reshaped the roster with youth, speed, and physicality, allowing Detroit to build a sustainable core instead of relying on one quarterback to cover structural flaws. At the same time, Goff quietly stabilized the offense. Free from the pressure of directly replacing Stafford's legacy, he grew into a leadership role, delivering late-game comebacks and running an efficient, composed offense that restored belief inside the locker room and credibility around the league. The true significance of the trade was momentum and not a single highlight. Detroit transitioned from survival to structure. The offense was now functional, the roster balanced, and the culture shifted from resignation to expectation. Green Bay Packers. Brett Favre. In 1992, the Green Bay Packers were a proud franchise trapped in decline. Decades removed from their Lombardi-era dominance, Green Bay had become synonymous with quarterback instability and fading relevance. Lambeau Field still carried history, but belief was gone. Incremental fixes weren't enough anymore. The Packers needed a reason to believe the franchise could matter again. That belief arrived through a gamble. Green Bay sent a first-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for Brett Favre, a raw, hard-throwing quarterback who had barely played in Atlanta and was widely viewed as reckless and unreliable. Around the league, the move was questioned. Favre looked like a backup with a cannon arm and no control. Green Bay, however, wasn't trading for polish. They were trading for fearlessness, arm talent, and the belief that chaos, if properly guided, could become greatness. Favre didn't take long to change the franchise's trajectory. Brett Favre's first meaningful appearance with the Packers saw him come off the bench and throw a game-winning touchdown that instantly electrified Lambeau Field. From that moment on, the energy around the team shifted. Favre evolved into the engine of a reborn Packers franchise, winning 3 consecutive NFL MVP awards, restoring Green Bay as a perennial contender, and leading the team to a championship in Super Bowl 31. Favre's career in Green Bay was defined by audacity, last-second touchdowns, impossible throws, and comeback wins fueled by sheer belief. He made mistakes, but he made football joyful again in Wisconsin. Brett Favre brought swagger back to Lambeau, turned Sundays into events, and bridged Green Bay's storied past into a modern era of sustained excellence. Without this move, there is no Packers renaissance. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Heading into spring 2017, the Kansas City Chiefs were already successful, but boxed in. Under Andy Reid, they were playoff regulars, disciplined, well-coached, and consistently competitive behind veteran quarterback Alex Smith. The problem was the ceiling. Kansas City knew exactly how far that version of the team could go. To break through, they would have to risk everything that had made them stable. That risk came on draft night. The Chiefs traded up with the Buffalo Bills, surrendering premium draft capital to move into the top 10 and select Patrick Mahomes. At the time, Mahomes was viewed as a boom-or-bust gamble, a gunslinger from an air raid system with unconventional mechanics, aggressive instincts, and a highlight-heavy resume that scared traditional evaluators. Kansas City didn't draft him to fit their offense. They drafted him to replace it. Reid was betting that creativity, arm talent, and instinct mattered more than orthodoxy. When Mahomes became the starter in 2018, the league shifted almost overnight. He threw 50 touchdown passes, won NFL MVP, and turned supposed quarterback mistakes into repeatable weapons. No-look throws, off-platform lasers, and impossible completions delivered with calm precision. Kansas City evolved from contender to standard-bearer, reaching multiple AFC championship games, winning Super Bowls, and sustaining dominance rarely seen in the modern era. Mahomes changed how the Chiefs execute their offense. He expanded it, elevating everyone around him and erasing deficits that once felt insurmountable. The trade's value crystallized in the 2021 divisional round against Buffalo, the 13 seconds game. With almost no time left, Mahomes calmly delivered 2 instant completions to force overtime, then ended the game himself. This was not your ordinary comeback, but inevitability. Coverage rules changed, defensive logic broke, quarterback expectations permanently shifted. This acquisition didn't simply land a superstar. It created a dynasty, redefined offensive football, and placed Kansas City at the center of the NFL universe. New England Patriots, Randy Moss. In 2007, Randy Moss was widely viewed as damaged goods. Once the most feared deep threat in football, Moss had just endured 2 disastrous seasons with the Oakland Raiders, defined by dysfunction, losing, and visible frustration. His effort was questioned, his attitude scrutinized, and many around the league believed his best football was already behind him. The talent was undeniable, the belief was gone. The New England Patriots saw something completely different. They sent Oakland a 4th-round pick, a shockingly low price for a receiver of Moss's caliber. Bill Belichick believed Moss hadn't lost his ability, he had lost structure. New England offered discipline, role clarity, and the perfect quarterback pairing in Tom Brady. For minimal cost, the Patriots acquired the most physically dominant receiver of his generation at exactly the right moment. The result was one of the most explosive offensive seasons in NFL history. By the end of 2007, Moss caught 23 touchdown passes, shattering the single-season record and redefining vertical dominance in a modern passing offense. Defensive backs weren't just beaten, they were erased. Paired with Brady, Moss turned routine throws into instant touchdowns through elite speed, body control, and unmatched red zone dominance. New England went 16-0 in the regular season, overwhelming defenses that knew what was coming and still couldn't stop it. Moss's delivered weekly, 3 touchdown games, deep strikes that flipped momentum instantly, red zone fades that felt automatic. While the season ended 1 win short of perfection, the significance of the trade was undeniable. The 2007 Patriots offense became the benchmark for offensive dominance, and Moss's resurgence permanently reframed his legacy. New England turned a 4th-round pick into one of the most devastating weapons the league has ever seen, proving that context doesn't just matter in football, it defines careers. Seattle Seahawks, Marshawn Lynch. In 2010, the Seattle Seahawks were searching for something more basic than talent. They were searching for a foundation. The roster was in transition, the offense lacked intimidation, and there was no defining personality to anchor the team. Buffalo's Marshawn Lynch was a former first-round pick whose career had stalled. Injuries, inconsistency, and friction with the Buffalo Bills had pushed him out of favor, and around the league, he was no longer viewed as a franchise-altering player. Seattle saw something others missed. The Seahawks traded a fourth-round pick and a conditional mid-round pick to acquire Lynch in a deal that barely registered nationally. This was not a move for production or name value. Seattle were betting on attitude. Internally, Seattle believed toughness could travel, that a single player could change how a team played, practiced, and competed. They weren't trading for statistics. They were trading for edge. Lynch's punishing running style immediately altered Seattle's offensive personality. Every carry was violent, every yard contested, every drive physically taxing for defenses. The transformation crystallized in the 2010 NFC wildcard game against New Orleans, when Lynch broke tackle after tackle on a thunderous touchdown run, so powerful it registered on seismic equipment. The play immortalized as Beastquake. That run did two things. It won a playoff game, and it announced Seattle's arrival. From that moment on, the Seahawks had a clear blueprint: physical, relentless, unapologetic. Lynch became the heartbeat of a team that would dominate the NFC, fueling deep playoff runs and serving as the offensive counterweight to the Legion of Boom. His legacy in Seattle was built on tone-setting runs, fourth-quarter wear-down drives, and a mentality that broke opponents mentally as much as physically. This trade gave Seattle a running back. It gave them a soul and laid the foundation for the most successful era in franchise history. San Francisco 49ers, Jerry Rice. Heading into the 1985 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers were already champions, fresh off a Super Bowl and firmly established under Bill Walsh. But Walsh was thinking more than just sustaining success. He wanted to extend it. He believed the next evolution of the West Coast offense required a receiver who could do everything at an elite level: run every route, separate with precision, block with intent, and dominate without relying on pure speed. That belief pushed San Francisco to act aggressively. The 49ers traded up in the first round, surrendering multiple premium picks to select Jerry Rice out of Mississippi Valley State. This move by the 49ers was bold at the time, given Rice was a small school prospect many teams didn't fully understand. Around the league, doubts centered on Rice's level of competition and whether his game would translate against NFL defenses. San Francisco ignored consensus and trusted evaluation. They weren't trading up for flash or measurables. They were trading up for mastery. What followed was the most dominant career in NFL history, regardless of position. Rice became the standard for consistency, excellence, and longevity, winning 3 Super Bowls and serving as the offensive backbone across multiple championship eras and quarterbacks. His postseason dominance was unmatched, highlighted by Super Bowl 23, where he posted 11 catches for 215 yards, still the single-game receiving record in Super Bowl history. Defenses knew where the ball was going and still couldn't stop it. Beyond championships, Rice rewrote the record book: career receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, playoff production, and longevity. His route running was surgical, his conditioning legendary, and his separation in critical moments inevitable. That move secured the defining weapon of the West Coast offense and extended the 49ers dynasty across decades. Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown. On draft night in 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles made one of the cleanest and most decisive moves of the modern era. Instead of waiting years for a rookie receiver to develop, Philadelphia traded a first-round pick and a third-round pick to the Tennessee Titans for A.J. Brown, then immediately signed him to a long-term extension. For Eagles, this move symbolized a rare moment of clarity: a proven, elite receiver entering his prime was available for draft pick cost because of contract concerns, not performance. The Eagles recognized the inefficiency instantly. Brown was already a dominant NFL receiver, capable of winning at every level of the field. Philadelphia didn't want projection or patience. They wanted certainty. By acquiring Brown, they removed guesswork from the offense and installed a known, reliable force who could dictate coverage from day one. The impact was immediate. From his first game in Philadelphia, Brown reshaped the offense with his physicality, run-after-catch ability, and dominance in one-on-one matchups. Defenses were forced to adjust. Safeties crept closer, boxes lightened, and coverage rules bent. Most importantly, Brown unlocked Jalen Hurts. With a true alpha receiver on the outside, Hurts evolved from a question mark into an MVP-caliber quarterback, attacking tight windows with confidence and trusting throws before breaks. The Eagles' offense became one of the league's most efficient and explosive units almost overnight. That transformation hit its high point during Philadelphia's run to Super Bowl 57. Brown delivered dominant postseason performances, capped by a physically imposing Super Bowl showing where he punished defenders with strength, balance, and elite ball skills. Every time the Eagles needed momentum, Brown supplied it, not with finesse, but force. This trade completed the offense, stabilized the quarterback position, and accelerated Philadelphia straight into championship contention. Washington Commanders, Sonny Jurgensen. By the mid-1960s, Washington Redskins were a franchise caught between eras. The league was still dominated by conservative, run-heavy offenses, but change was coming, and Washington needed a quarterback capable of leading it rather than reacting to it. That opportunity arrived through a rare quarterback-for-quarterback trade when Washington sent Norm Snead and Claude Crabb to Philadelphia for Sonny Jurgensen. The deal didn't dominate headlines, but internally it reflected strong conviction. Washington believed Jurgensen's struggles in Philadelphia were situational, not a reflection of his talent. That belief proved correct almost immediately. Once in Washington, Jurgensen emerged as one of the most gifted pure passers the NFL had ever seen. At a time when most teams leaned on the run, he attacked defenses vertically with confidence, arm strength, and precision. He led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns multiple times, doing so in an era when defensive contact rules and offensive limitations made those accomplishments far more difficult than in modern football. Jurgensen's ability to stretch the field fundamentally changed Washington's offensive identity. His deep throws off play action punished defenses that crowded the line of scrimmage, while his pocket poise and diagnostic ability allowed him to exploit coverages before they fully developed. Washington suddenly had an offense that dictated terms rather than surviving conservatively. Even without consistent championship success, the team became respected for its ability to throw the football in a league still hesitant to embrace the pass. Jurgensen built his legacy on influence, not on a single iconic play or postseason run. He modernized Washington's offense, proved that a pass-first philosophy could succeed ahead of league-wide adoption, and gave the franchise credibility during a transitional era. That acquisition brought innovation, legitimacy, and a franchise icon. Houston Texans, DeAndre Hopkins. On draft night in 2013, the Houston Texans were already contenders, coming off back-to-back division titles with one of the league's most physical rosters. What they didn't have was a true number one receiver, someone who could win in isolation, survive tight coverage, and stabilize the offense in high-leverage moments. Houston addressed that by trading pick number 27, 2013 first, pick number 77, 2013 third, and pick number 89, 2013 third, to Miami to move up and draft DeAndre Hopkins. It was aggressive, but calculated. This move reflected belief in a player capable of defining the Texans' offense for years. At the time, the move didn't dominate headlines. Hopkins wasn't viewed as a flashy, speed-based prospect, but Houston saw something different: elite hands, physical toughness, and an unmatched ability to win contested catches. They were not drafting hype or measurables. They were drafting reliability. Hopkins' game was built for tight windows and hostile coverage, and the Texans trusted that skill set to translate regardless of circumstance. That belief proved correct almost immediately. Hopkins became one of the most dependable receivers in football, producing elite seasons despite constant quarterback changes and heavy defensive attention. He led the league in receiving touchdowns in 2017 and in 2015. He finished second in receiving yards in the NFL. At Texans, Hopkins thrived in isolation and treated contested throws as opportunities. Double coverage rarely mattered. If the ball was in the air, Hopkins played as if it belonged to him. Houston's offense ran through Hopkins. In high-leverage games, he delivered defining performances, repeatedly winning one-on-one matchups when answers were needed most. This trade did more than land the Texans a great receiver. It gave them offensive certainty. Indianapolis Colts, trading away Jeff George. By 1994, the Indianapolis Colts had reached the end of the Jeff George experiment. George was one of the most naturally gifted passers in football, a cannon arm, effortless deep velocity, prototype size, but constant tension between player, coaches, and locker room made the situation unsalvageable. Talent was never the issue. Stability was. Rather than letting a toxic situation linger, Indianapolis chose leverage. The Colts traded George to the Atlanta Falcons for a 1994 first-round pick, a 1994 third-round pick, and a conditional 1995 first-round pick that ultimately conveyed. It was a massive return for a quarterback whose value swung wildly between elite ability and organizational friction. This was an organizational reset, not a football-fit decision. In Atlanta, George showed exactly why the Colts were able to command that price. He played some of the best football of his career at Atlanta and led the Falcons to the playoffs. When protected and allowed to attack vertically, his arm talent was overwhelming. His success reinforced a simple truth. The problem was never his ceiling, it was sustainability. For Indianapolis, the real win was control. The draft capital gave the Colts breathing room and a clean break from a situation that had stalled progress. This trade stands as one of their most important, not for bringing back a star, but for allowing them to walk away at their peak value. Jacksonville Jaguars, Mark Brunell. In 1995, the Jacksonville Jaguars were an expansion franchise with no margin for patience. Most new teams accept years of losing while searching for a quarterback. Jacksonville refused to wait. Instead of gambling in the draft, they targeted immediate stability, trading a 1995 third-round pick and a 1995 fifth-round pick to the Green Bay Packers for Mark Brunell, who was buried behind Brett Favre. Around the league, Brunell was viewed as a capable backup with tools, not a future cornerstone. For Jacksonville, this was a calculated shortcut. They weren't chasing upside 3 years down the road. They needed competence, leadership, and calm immediately. Brunell brought experience from a winning environment, an understanding of NFL defenses, and the ability to survive chaos. The trade was urgent, intentional, and perfectly aligned with what an expansion team actually needs. In only their second season in 1996, Jacksonville stunned the league by reaching the AFC Championship game, one of the fastest ascents ever by an expansion franchise. His poise on the road, especially in playoff wins over established teams, gave the Jaguars instant credibility. His mobility shaped the offense, extending plays and punishing defenses without slipping into recklessness. From 1996 through 1999, Jacksonville became one of the NFL's winningest teams, reaching multiple AFC Championship games and posting consistent double-digit win seasons. Brunell became the face of the franchise's golden era. Expansion teams aren't supposed to work this fast, but Jacksonville skipped years of instability for the cost of mid-round picks. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1995, draft, trade down. By the mid-1990s, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were buried under years of losing and draft misfires. They didn't just need talent, they needed structure. In the 1995 NFL Draft, Tampa resisted desperation and traded down, choosing additional premium picks over tying their future to a single savior. It reflected a clear understanding that one player wouldn't fix a broken foundation. At the time, the move felt unremarkable. Trade downs rarely generate excitement, especially for struggling teams. But Tampa's front office prioritized depth and margin for error over hope. Accumulating picks allowed them to build a roster deliberately instead of gambling everything on one decision. Winning the weekend didn't matter. Reshaping how the franchise built teams did. That philosophy triggered a chain reaction. The added draft capital helped Tampa construct a dominant defensive core built on speed, discipline, and violence. That identity came to define the franchise, anchored by cornerstone defenders like Warren Sapp and Derrick Brooks, players who shaped Tampa Bay football for an entire generation. The payoff peaked in Super Bowl 37, when Tampa's defense overwhelmed Oakland Raiders in one of the most dominant championship performances ever. While the 1995 trade down didn't draft every star directly, it marked the philosophical pivot that made that era possible. Tennessee Titans/Houston Oilers, 1996, draft, trade down. By 1996, the Houston Oilers were a franchise surrounded by uncertainty, ownership turmoil, declining attendance, and an impending relocation meant they needed flexibility, not a headline-grabbing gamble. Instead of locking themselves into a single premium draft slot, Houston traded down in the 1996 NFL Draft, exchanging short-term buzz for control, depth, and leverage. To casual fans, the move looked uninspiring. There was no star attached, no instant payoff to celebrate. Internally, though, the Oilers were making a structural decision. Accumulating early and mid-round picks gave them options as the organization braced for transition, not just a new season, but a new city, a new identity, and an uncertain competitive future. The value of that choice emerged over time. The added flexibility helped stabilize the roster through the move to Tennessee and laid the groundwork for the team that eventually became the Tennessee Titans. That roster-building philosophy fueled a late 1990s contender that reached Super Bowl 34, coming 1 yard short of a title. The defining image of that era, Kevin Dyson being tackled just short of the goal line, doesn't exist without years of patient, disciplined team building. This trade is remembered for its responsibility, not its flash. When panic would have been easy, the Oilers chose patience. Sometimes the best trade isn't the one fans cheer, it's the one that keeps the franchise alive long enough to matter again. Pittsburgh Steelers, Troy Polamalu. In the 2003 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers identified one player who perfectly fit their defensive DNA, Troy Polamalu. The problem was clear: he would not fall to them. Sitting outside the typical range for elite defensive prospects, Pittsburgh made a rare move, trading up with the New York Jets to secure him late in the first round. Pittsburgh sent pick 27th and pick 92, third, to the Jets. They received pick 16 from the Jets. For a franchise built on patience, this was pure conviction. The decision stemmed from the belief that Polamalu could elevate the entire defense. The Steelers prioritized conviction over testing numbers and projections. They were betting on instinct, intelligence, and controlled chaos. From the moment Polamalu took over the secondary, Pittsburgh's defense became unpredictable and suffocating. He didn't operate within the structure, he bent it. Blitzes arrived from nowhere. Routes disappeared mid-throw. Plays died before quarterbacks understood what they were seeing. His signature moments are etched into NFL history. The defining one came in the 2008 AFC Championship game, when Polamalu intercepted Joe Flacco and returned it 40 yards for a touchdown, sealing Pittsburgh's trip to the Super Bowl. That play captured everything he was: anticipation, explosion, and perfect timing under maximum pressure. His Defensive Player of the Year season only confirmed his impact, producing game-changing plays that rarely showed up in traditional coverage metrics. Polamalu helped lead Pittsburgh to 2 Super Bowl championships and helped preserve the Steelers' defensive continuity into a new era. Quarterbacks changed protections based on where he might be. Coordinators burned practice time, preparing for chaos they couldn't predict. In addition to landing a Hall of Fame safety, this trade protected the Steelers' soul. Troy Polamalu was disciplined, wrapped in disorder, and Pittsburgh was willing to move mountains to get him. New Orleans Saints. Ricky Williams. In 1999, the New Orleans Saints were desperate for relevance. Years of losing had worn down the fan base, and incremental progress no longer felt acceptable. That desperation led to one of the boldest draft day gambles in NFL history, as New Orleans traded an unprecedented package of picks to the Washington football team to move up and select Ricky Williams. The deal included their entire 1999 draft class, plus future picks. Not a rebuild plan, but an all-in declaration that Williams was the rebuild. At the time, the logic was clear. Ricky Williams was viewed as a once-in-a-generation running back prospect, powerful, explosive, and capable of carrying an offense by himself. The Saints committed fully instead of hedging or spreading risk. They believed Williams could redefine the franchise overnight and become the focal point of everything they did. It was extreme, unapologetic, and instantly became league folklore. On the field, Williams delivered real impact. He ran with violence, balance, and endurance, absorbing massive workloads and punishing defenses that knew what was coming. His breakout 2000 season, when he rushed for over 1,000 yards and scored 8 touchdowns, helped lead the Saints to their first ever playoff victory, a defining moment in franchise history. For a fan base starved of success, Williams brought credibility, belief, and tangible progress. The cost, however, was inseparable from the legacy. By sacrificing so much draft capital, New Orleans limited its ability to build depth around him, and his brilliance could only carry the roster so far. The trade became a cautionary tale about betting everything on one star. Still, it mattered. Ricky Williams didn't create a dynasty, but he changed the emotional trajectory of the Saints, proving they could matter, even if only for a moment. New York Giants. Eli Manning. The 2004 NFL Draft produced one of the most dramatic quarterback standoffs in league history. The San Diego Chargers selected Eli Manning #1 overall, but Eli made it clear he would not play for them. Rather than force a fractured relationship, San Diego struck a deal with the New York Giants, who were desperate for stability at quarterback. New York acquired Manning in exchange for Phillip Rivers, a 2004 third-round pick, a 2005 first-round pick, and a 2005 fifth-round pick, a massive price paid out of urgency, not caution. Certainty drove this trade, not value charts or patience. The Giants believed Eli Manning was uniquely built for New York, mentally tough, unflappable under pressure, and capable of surviving the city's spotlight. The decision to trade up centered on certainty rather than upside. They were trading up for composure, trusting that when everything tightened, Manning wouldn't. That belief defined his legacy. While Manning's regular season career was often streaky, his postseason resume is untouchable. He led the Giants to 2 Super Bowl championships, both against the New England Patriots dynasty. The defining moment came in Super Bowl 42, when Manning escaped a near-certain sack and launched the throw that set up David Tyree's helmet catch, a play that exists only because Manning refused to go down. 4 years later, he delivered again in Super Bowl 46, engineering another clutch fourth-quarter drive capped by a pinpoint sideline throw to Mario Manningham. 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, both against a team many considered unbeatable. Eli Manning's trade did more than give New York a quarterback. It brought them immortality, all traced back to one bold decision on draft night. New York Jets. Joe Namath signing. In the mid-1960s, professional football was split between 2 leagues fighting for legitimacy. The AFL needed stars, credibility, and proof it could stand toe-to-toe with the NFL. The New York Jets understood that reality better than anyone. Their move to acquire the rights that led to Joe Namath represented a calculated strike for relevance, visibility, and belief, not just roster improvement. Namath was a rare commodity. He had elite arm talent, confidence bordering on audacity, and the personality to command national attention. The Jets knew landing him wouldn't just change their team, it would change how the entire league was perceived. It was a declaration that the AFL could produce stars big enough to rival anything the NFL had to offer. Namath delivered exactly what was required. Before Super Bowl III, he famously guaranteed a Jets victory over the heavily favored Baltimore Colts, then backed it up with a poised, mistake-free performance. The Jets' win shattered the myth of NFL superiority and instantly legitimized the AFL on the sport's biggest stage. That victory by the new Jets altered football's power structure and accelerated the AFL-NFL merger. For the Jets, Namath became a franchise icon. For the sport, he became a turning point. His trade changed professional football forever, making it one of the most important trades in league history. Las Vegas/Oakland Raiders, Willie Brown. In 1967, the Oakland Raiders were still defining who they wanted to be. The AFL was young and chaotic, and Al Davis believed control came through takeaways, not just offense. When Oakland acquired Willie Brown from the Denver Broncos through waivers, it barely registered as a blockbuster. But the Raiders knew exactly what they were getting. Not safe coverage, but a defensive weapon built for aggression. Brown transcended the role of a cover corner, pairing elite instincts and rare ball skills with the confidence to gamble without losing discipline. Oakland was building around pressuring quarterbacks, baiting throws, and turning defense into offense. Philosophy drove this trade, not name recognition. Willie Brown fit perfectly into a vision designed to intimidate, punish mistakes, and flip games instantly. Once in Oakland, Brown became the backbone of the Raiders' defense for more than a decade. He dictated how quarterbacks played, erasing routes and turning routine snaps into momentum swings. His defining moment came in Super Bowl XI, when he read Fran Tarkenton perfectly, intercepted the pass, and returned it 75 yards for a touchdown. At the time, the longest interception return in Super Bowl history. The play sealed a championship and captured Raiders football at its peak. Brown helped lead Oakland to multiple Super Bowl titles, anchoring a defense built on pressure, turnovers, and fear. Willie Brown gave the Raiders swagger in the secondary and a blueprint for dominance without the ball. Oakland didn't trade for a cornerback. Los Angeles Chargers, Eli Manning/Philip Rivers. The 2004 NFL Draft put the San Diego Chargers in a no-win situation. They selected Eli Manning, #1 overall, but it was immediately clear he would never play a snap for them. Rather than panic or accept a discounted return, San Diego leaned into leverage, negotiating with the New York Giants and turning resistance into opportunity. The Chargers flipped Manning's rights for Philip Rivers, a 2004 third-round pick, a 2005 first-round pick, and a 2005 fifth-round pick. A calculated pivot defined this move, not damage control. San Diego believed Rivers had the arm strength, toughness, and competitiveness to anchor the franchise, and the added draft capital ensured the move was more than a one-player gamble, but a broader roster investment. Rivers became the face of the Chargers for 16 seasons, providing rare stability at quarterback. He delivered elite production year after year, piling up passing yards, touchdowns, and Pro Bowl selections while keeping the team consistently competitive. His defining trait was toughness, most famously displayed during the 2007 postseason when he played through a torn ACL and still led the Chargers to the AFC Championship game. While San Diego never reached a Super Bowl with Rivers, his tenure produced multiple division titles, deep playoff runs, and some of the league's most dangerous offenses. More importantly, he gave the franchise continuity, something far more valuable than a single draft hit. This trade turned a draft day standoff into more than a decade of relevance. In addition to recovering from losing Eli Manning, this trade helped secure the Chargers' future in the process. Los Angeles Rams, Marshall Faulk. In 1999, the St. Louis Rams were drifting, cycling through quarterbacks and identities without finding a true core. That changed when they traded with the Indianapolis Colts to acquire Marshall Faulk for a 1999 second-round pick and a 2005 round pick. Faulk was already a star, but Indianapolis still viewed him primarily as a running back nearing a contract crossroads. The Rams saw something much bigger. In St. Louis, Falk became the offense itself rather than a simple positional upgrade. Head coach Dick Vermeil and coordinator Mike Martz envisioned an attack built around his versatility, forcing defenses into impossible choices every snap. Load the box and get burned through the air. Spread out and get punished on the ground. Falk became the engine of the greatest show on turf, transforming the Rams into an offensive juggernaut. He won NFL MVP in 2000, produced 4 straight 2,000-yard from scrimmage seasons, and emerged as the most complete offensive weapon in football. His ability to run, catch, block, and dictate coverage made traditional defensive roles obsolete. That impact was most evident during the Rams' 1999 Super Bowl run, where Falk's presence unlocked everything around him, including Kurt Warner. Linebackers couldn't cover him, safeties couldn't tackle him, and defensive schemes collapsed trying to account for him. This trade didn't just create a champion, it created one of the most influential offenses the NFL has ever seen. Miami Dolphins, Larry Little. Not every franchise-altering move comes with headlines. In the late 1960s, the Miami Dolphins were still a young organization searching for credibility. They didn't need flash, they needed a foundation. That's why acquiring Larry Little mattered so much. While most fans barely noticed offensive linemen, Miami understood championships are built in the trenches. The move itself was quiet. No hype, no drama. Just smart team building rooted in control and durability. The focus for Miami was leverage at the line of scrimmage, not skill position buzz or short-term attention. Little gave them exactly that, becoming the kind of player whose value shows up not in highlights, but in how games slowly tilt out of reach. Larry Little became a cornerstone of one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history. As part of Miami's legendary offensive line, he helped power a rushing attack that overwhelmed defenses week after week. His impact was central to the Dolphins' run of 3 straight Super Bowl appearances and back-to-back championships, including the iconic 1972 undefeated season. There isn't one defining highlight attached to Little's legacy, and that's the point. His dominance showed up in entire games controlled by halftime, in clean pockets, sustained drives, and fourth-quarter clock killers. This trade didn't bring Miami a poster star. It brought them command of the line of scrimmage, and with it, sustained dominance. Larry Little did more than help the Dolphins win titles. He helped define what championship football looks like. Minnesota Vikings, Jared Allen. By 2008, the Minnesota Vikings were close, but not complete. They had a physical defense, a strong run game, and a roster built to contend, but they lacked one thing, a pass rusher who could end drives by himself. Minnesota didn't want rotational pressure. They wanted fear. That search led them to Kansas City Chiefs and Jared Allen, already one of the league's most disruptive edge rushers. The Vikings paid a steep price, a first-round pick, 2 third-round picks, and a 6th-rounder, and they did it without hesitation. A declaration defined this move, not bargain hunting or projection. Minnesota believed one elite defender could tilt the balance of the entire team, and Allen was a known problem offenses had to plan around every single week. Allen exceeded his expectations. From the moment he arrived, protection schemes bent around him. Tackles needed help, tight ends stayed in, and quarterbacks sped up their internal clocks before the snap. His most famous season came in 2011, when he recorded 22 sacks, almost tying the single-season sack record and turning every week into a chase for history while terrorizing offenses across the league. His impact went beyond numbers. Allen was a central force on the 2009 Vikings team that reached the NFC Championship game, creating short fields, forcing turnovers, and allowing the defense to dictate games rather than react. Relentlessness, not just strength or technique, is what made him special. He wore down offensive lines, erased comfort, and turned close games into survival tests. Arizona Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald, 2004, NFL Draft. With the 3rd overall pick in hand, Arizona approached the 2004 NFL Draft without any movement. While quarterback talk dominated the top of that class, Arizona's problem ran deeper than any single position. Years of coaching turnover and unstable quarterback play had left the franchise without credibility or continuity. What they needed most was a cornerstone player, someone durable, respected, and capable of anchoring the organization for the long haul. Larry Fitzgerald fit that profile cleanly. His Pittsburgh tape positioned him as the safest prospect outside quarterback, with elite hands, precise routes, size, and uncommon maturity. The third overall choice by Arizona was met with immediate league-wide approval. This decision avoided risk or luxury framing and instead reflected a disciplined approach that matched talent with long-term necessity. Fitzgerald validated the choice right away, producing despite rotating quarterbacks and unstable offenses. His impact only widened over time, highlighted by a historic 2008 postseason in which he carried Arizona to its first Super Bowl appearance with one of the greatest playoff runs by a receiver. More importantly, he delivered consistency across eras, giving the Cardinals relevance for more than a decade. Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones, 2011 NFL Draft. Trade up. Atlanta held the 27th overall pick in the 2011 NFL Draft as a playoff-caliber team led by a young quarterback in Matt Ryan. What they lacked was a true difference-maker on the outside, a receiver who could tilt coverage, punish single matchups, and raise the ceiling of the entire offense. Rather than wait and hope talent fell, Atlanta identified one target and chose to act decisively. That target was Julio Jones, and securing him required a massive move. To jump from pick 27 to pick 6, Atlanta sent Cleveland 5 premium selections, their 2011 first, second, and fourth round picks, plus their 2012 first and fourth round picks. The reaction was split. Cleveland was praised for the haul, while Atlanta was criticized for paying a historic price for a wide receiver, with many arguing no non-quarterback could justify that level of investment. Once Jones took the field, the conversation changed fast. He was an immediate force, physically dominant, coverage-altering, and productive from day one. As the years passed, the trade skewed decisively. Cleveland's picks never produced comparable impact, while Atlanta gained a perennial All-Pro who powered their most successful stretch, including deep playoff runs and a Super Bowl appearance. This move stands as a franchise identifying a rare player and refusing to miss, a gamble on greatness that paid off in full. Baltimore Ravens, Ray Lewis, 1996 NFL Draft. In their first season after the move from Cleveland, the Ravens approached the 1996 NFL Draft, needing to build credibility from scratch. With the 26th overall pick, they stayed put rather than chasing attention or making a symbolic splash. The goal was simple but difficult. Find players who could stabilize a brand new organization and give it direction beyond a single season. Ray Lewis did not arrive with superstar expectations. Linebackers rarely carried that label, and Lewis faced concerns about size despite his quick speed, instincts, and range on film. Baltimore's late first-round choice was received without much reaction. Most evaluations treated it as a practical defensive move, not a turning point, and its eventual impact went largely unrecognized. Lewis emerged as the emotional and tactical center of the defense from his rookie season, setting standards for preparation, intensity, and accountability. As the roster evolved, everything on defense was built around him. He anchored historically dominant units, led the Ravens to 2 Super Bowl championships, and was the constant underpinning each successful era in Baltimore's football history. Drafting Ray Lewis in 1996 reshaped the franchise and left a lasting mark on the league, not because it chased attention, but because it secured the foundation of a franchise. Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, 2018 NFL Draft. Trade up. The Buffalo Bills owned the 12th overall selection in the 2018 NFL Draft, fresh off snapping a long playoff drought, but still without a long-term quarterback solution. Sitting outside the top 10 put them in a vulnerable spot, with multiple quarterback-needy teams drafting ahead. Knowing their preferred options likely wouldn't reach pick 12, Buffalo chose to be proactive rather than risk watching the board collapse in front of them. Buffalo traded with Tampa Bay to move up to the 7th overall pick, sending the Buccaneers pick 12 along with second-round selections in 2018 and 2019. The Bills used that pick on Josh Allen, a prospect whose strong arm strength and athleticism were matched by major concerns about college accuracy and consistency. The reaction was loud and critical. Both the acquisition and the cost faced skepticism, as the trade increased exposure on a quarterback still considered a projection. The skepticism didn't disappear overnight. Allen's rookie season was uneven, reinforcing doubts, but Buffalo stayed committed and built an offense around his strengths while investing heavily in development. By improving his mechanics and processing, Josh Allen placed himself among the league's most dynamic quarterbacks, and the Bills rose into annual contention. The trade to pick 7 stands as the moment Buffalo finally secured its future at the game's most important position and raised the trajectory of the franchise. Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton, 2011 NFL Draft. Coming off the league's worst record, Carolina held the #1 overall pick in the 2011 NFL Draft. There was no trade drama or uncertainty at the top. The quarterback position had collapsed, the roster lacked a central star, and the franchise needed a reset that could change its direction. By draft night, Carolina's decision was already settled. Cam Newton's rise made that decision straightforward. At Auburn, he put together a college season marked by rare dominance, winning the Heisman Trophy and leading Auburn to a national championship. His combination of size, arm strength, and athleticism separated him from every other quarterback in the class. Carolina going first overall with Cam Newton produced a loud response that few questioned, with most analysts agreeing on the pick, while noting concerns about how his style would translate to the NFL. Those concerns disappeared quickly. Newton's rookie season was historic, instantly reshaping the Panthers' offense and pushing the team back into relevance. As his career progressed, he carried Carolina to an MVP season and a Super Bowl appearance, anchoring the most successful stretch of football the franchise experienced in the modern era. Injuries eventually shortened that window, but the impact of the pick never changed. Selecting Newton first overall stands as a clear case of a franchise recognizing its moment and transforming its ceiling with one decisive move. Chicago Bears, Walter Payton, 1975 NFL Draft. The Bears controlled the 4th overall selection in the 1975 NFL Draft, choosing not to move up or down the board. The franchise was searching for offensive direction in a league still driven by the running game, and Chicago needed a player capable of carrying consistent weight week after week. This approach focused less on making noise at the top of the board and more on finding someone durable and reliable enough to stabilize the offense. Walter Payton arrived from Jackson State without the national attention given to major program stars, but evaluators saw rare balance, vision, toughness, and competitiveness. Nothing about Chicago's 4th overall choice disrupted the room. Payton's prospect profile was strong, though doubts remained about translating small school production to the NFL. The pick came with optimism, not certainty. That uncertainty disappeared over time as Payton earned his stature through volume and durability, steadily becoming the engine of the Bears' offense in one of the league's most punishing eras for runners. He broke records, carried Chicago through its most successful modern stretch, and capped his career with a Super Bowl championship. Cincinnati Bengals, Anthony Munoz, 1980 NFL Draft. Cincinnati held the 3rd overall pick in the 1980 NFL Draft and stayed in place without making a trade. As a young franchise in an increasingly physical division, Cincinnati faced a familiar choice: chase visible offensive firepower or invest in the structure that makes an offense function. They chose to build from the inside out, prioritizing long-term stability over draft night excitement. Anthony Munoz came out of USC with rare size, athleticism, and technical polish for an offensive lineman, but his evaluation carried risk. Knee injuries in college raised durability concerns, and selecting an offensive tackle that high, especially one with medical questions, drew mixed reactions. Analysts respected the talent, but questioned whether the gamble made sense at pick 3, particularly at a position that rarely generated headlines. Those doubts disappeared once Munoz reached the field. With time, he was the gold standard for left tackle play, erasing top pass rushers and stabilizing the offense. Quarterback play improved, the run game gained consistency, and Cincinnati's offensive floor rose simply because he was in the lineup. Through the years, Munoz anchored multiple Super Bowl teams and remained at the top of his game across eras, transforming a cautious draft decision into a benchmark top 3 outcome. Cleveland Browns, Jim Brown, 1957 NFL Draft. By 1957, Cleveland had established itself as one of pro football's marquee franchises heading into the NFL Draft, dominant in the AAFC and successful after joining the NFL. Even with that pedigree, they were still missing one element, a player who could overwhelm opponents every single week. Without any trade movement, Cleveland used its first-round pick on a choice that did more than upgrade the roster. It permanently shifted the sport. Jim Brown arrived from Syracuse unlike any running back the league had ever seen. Bigger, faster, and more powerful than his peers, he stood apart even before playing a professional snap. The first-round decision by Cleveland made sense on athletic traits alone, with no historical lens for what would unfold. At that point, the league operated on collective schemes rather than individual dominance, with no historical example of a single player altering the game's structure on his own. That changed instantly. Brown led the NFL in rushing as a rookie and continued doing so throughout his career, forcing defenses to build entire game plans around stopping him, usually unsuccessfully. In just 9 seasons, he retired as the league's all-time leading rusher and its most feared offensive force, anchoring multiple championship runs along the way. Dallas Cowboys, Roger Staubach, 1964 NFL Draft, future selection. In 1964, Dallas operated under draft rules that allowed teams to select players years away from the NFL. Roger Staubach, fresh off winning the Heisman Trophy at the U.S. Naval Academy, fit that category perfectly. His mandatory military service meant any team drafting him would have to wait several seasons before seeing a return. Dallas used a 10th-round pick on Staubach with full awareness that patience, not immediacy, was the cost. Around the league, the selection drew skepticism. Quarterbacks from service academies were rare, and investing a pick in a player unavailable for years was seen by many as impractical. Staubach served 4 years of active duty, including time in Vietnam, before joining the Cowboys in 1969. When he arrived, Dallas was already competitive, but still unsettled at quarterback, and his path to the starting job was gradual rather than instant. Once Staubach took control, the payoff was unmistakable. His mobility, poise, and late-game command elevated the Cowboys into a dominant force, leading them to multiple Super Bowl appearances and championships. The years spent waiting quickly faded in importance compared to the success that followed. The 1964 10th-round selection stands as one of the smartest long-term bets in draft history, a patient decision that rewarded Dallas with sustained excellence across an entire era. Denver Broncos, John Elway, 1983 NFL Draft, post-draft trade. The 1983 NFL Draft placed John Elway at the center of immediate controversy. Widely viewed as the most talented quarterback in a historically loaded class, Elway was picked first overall by the Baltimore Colts, despite openly stating he would not play for them and was prepared to pursue a professional baseball career instead. Denver, drafting well outside the top spot, had no direct path to him on draft night, but the standoff created an opening few franchises ever get. Recognizing the leverage shift, Denver moved decisively and acquired Elway's rights in exchange for offensive lineman Chris Hinton, quarterback Mark Herman, and a 1984 first-round pick. The move drew heavy attention across the league. Some questioned the precedent of a player steering his destination, while others praised Denver for securing the clear prize of the draft without sacrificing its entire future. Elway justified the move almost instantly. He became Denver's starter early in his career and turned the Broncos into perennial contenders, carrying them to multiple Super Bowl appearances before finally winning back-to-back championships late in his career. Beyond the titles, he delivered sustained relevance and iconic quarterback play for over a decade. Detroit Lions, Barry Sanders, 1989 NFL Draft. Detroit held the third overall pick in the 1989 NFL Draft and made no trade moves. At the time, the franchise was searching for offensive electricity, a player who could tilt the field and give the team national relevance. That opportunity arrived with Barry Sanders, who stood out as the most dynamic non-quarterback in the class. Sanders emerged from Oklahoma State on the heels of a college season that reset expectations, separating himself with rare agility, vision, and open-field creativity. Detroit's third-round pick didn't spark debate, it closed it. Analysts saw him as a rare talent, capable of producing highlights on every touch, and Lions fans embraced the pick as a long-awaited spark. From his first season, Sanders delivered, becoming the focal point of the offense, producing explosive runs behind average blocking and forcing defenses to shape entire game plans around him. Over time, he won an MVP award, led the league in rushing multiple times, and kept Detroit relevant even when team success lagged. Green Bay Packers, Brett Favre, 1991 NFL Draft, drafted by Atlanta, acquired by Green Bay via trade. Brett Favre's NFL story technically began with the Atlanta Falcons, who selected him in the second round of the 1991 NFL Draft as a developmental quarterback. Coming out of southern Mississippi, Favre brought arm strength and toughness, yet remained raw and reckless to Atlanta, nowhere near a finished product. Atlanta showed little patience, playing him sparingly as a rookie and quickly losing confidence in his future with the team. That opened the door for Green Bay, a franchise desperate for a solid quarterback after decades of uncertainty. In February 1992, the Packers traded a first-round pick in the 1992 NFL Draft to Atlanta for Favre's rights, a move widely criticized at the time. Around the league, the reaction was disbelief, surrendering a first-round pick for a quarterback who had attempted just 4 passes felt irresponsible, and many thought the Falcons had easily won the deal. Once Favre took the field in Green Bay, the narrative flipped instantly. He brought toughness, improvisation, and durability that reshaped the franchise. Favre led the Packers to sustained relevance, multiple Super Bowl appearances, a championship, and an era of quarterback continuity defined by MVP seasons and an Iron Man streak. Acquiring Brett Favre proved a transformative move in NFL history, the moment Green Bay solved its quarterback problem for a generation. Houston Texans, J.J. Watt, 2011 NFL Draft. The Texans sat at number 11 overall in the 2011 NFL Draft without making a trade. While the roster was solid, the defense was missing someone who could take control of games. Most projections pointed Houston toward a more established or widely hyped defender, making J.J. Watt an unexpected name when the pick was announced. The reaction was skeptical. Analysts questioned the value, calling Watt a reach and criticizing Houston for selecting a high-motor Wisconsin lineman over more celebrated prospects. Fans were unsure as well. Watt was respected for effort and toughness, but few saw him as an immediate star worthy of a top 12 selection. On draft night, the pick generated more doubt than excitement. That doubt vanished quickly. Watt emerged as a dominant force, impacting games as a pass rusher, run defender, and alignment disruptor. Offenses had to account for him on every snap, reshaping protections and play design. Over time, his career placed him among the top defensive players of his era, marked by multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards and Houston's best seasons. Indianapolis Colts, Peyton Manning, 1998 NFL Draft. Indianapolis held the first overall pick in the 1998 NFL Draft after another losing season exposed how far the franchise still had to go. There was no serious discussion of trading the pick. The debate centered on one decision: Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. That decision set the tone for the entire draft, splitting the debate between Manning's command and Leaf's physical ceiling. Indianapolis chose Manning, a decision that drew strong but controlled reactions. Many analysts praised the selection as the safer path, citing his preparation, intelligence, accuracy, and control at the line of scrimmage, while others questioned whether the Colts had passed on a higher physical ceiling. Manning's rookie season fueled that criticism statistically, as interceptions piled up and patience was tested. Still, behind the numbers, he was already reshaping how the offense operated and raising expectations across the roster. The long-term results erased all doubt. Manning turned the Colts into a perennial contender, won multiple MVP awards, led consistent deep playoff runs, and delivered a Super Bowl championship. More than any single season or stat line, he gave Indianapolis rare stability at quarterback for over a decade, allowing the franchise to build with confidence year after year. Jacksonville Jaguars, Tony Boselli, 1995, NFL Draft. As an expansion team preparing for its first season, Jacksonville held the second overall pick in the 1995 NFL Draft. With no history, no established roster, and no trade maneuvering involved, the challenge was not splash. It was direction. While many expected a new team to chase an offensive skill player for instant buzz, Jacksonville faced a more basic problem: building something functional from the ground up. That led them to Tony Boselli. Selecting an offensive lineman that high drew mixed reactions. Evaluators respected Boselli's talent, but questioned whether an expansion team should invest such a premium pick in a left tackle without an offense in place. What those reactions missed was how ready Boselli was. He entered the league as a refined tackle prospect and provided immediate stability up front from day one. That decision paid off faster than anyone expected. Boselli served as the foundation the Jaguars built everything else around, protecting quarterbacks and allowing the offense to operate at a competitive level. Jacksonville reached the AFC Championship game within its first few seasons, an almost unheard-of rise for an expansion team. Injuries shortened Boselli's career, but the impact never faded. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, 2017 NFL Draft, trade up. With the 27th overall pick, Kansas City approached the 2017 NFL Draft as a playoff-caliber team still searching for offensive ceiling. Alex Smith had stabilized the franchise, yet Kansas City knew the ceiling was fixed. Andy Reid and Brett Veach identified Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback who could fundamentally raise that ceiling, but they also knew he wouldn't reach the late first round. To secure him, the Chiefs traded up with Buffalo, jumping from pick 27 to pick 10. Kansas City sent the Bills the 27th pick, a 2017 third-rounder, and a 2018 first-round pick in exchange for number 10. The reaction was skeptical. Mahomes' arm talent was undeniable, but analysts questioned his mechanics, decision-making, and readiness, especially given the cost and the fact that he would sit behind a playoff-caliber starter. Kansas City followed a patient plan, letting Mahomes learn for a year before handing him the offense. Once he took over, the evaluation flipped. His creativity, range, and playmaking transformed the Chiefs into an offensive juggernaut, leading to MVP awards, Super Bowl titles, and sustained contention. That trade ranks as a defining moment of the modern draft era, a calculated leap that altered Kansas City's path and the league itself. Las Vegas Raiders, Oakland Raiders, Gene Upshaw, 1967 NFL Draft. Oakland approached the 1967 NFL Draft focused on building substance rather than chasing headlines. With a first-round pick and no trade maneuvering, Oakland targeted the trenches, understanding that long-term success required strength and consistency up front. In an era when offensive linemen rarely drew attention, the Raiders identified Gene Upshaw to anchor the franchise for years. The first-round move on Courtney Upshaw was met with quiet acknowledgement rather than excitement. Guards were rarely treated as centerpiece picks, and Courtney Upshaw arrived without fanfare or national hype. What Oakland saw instead was toughness, durability, intelligence, and a physical edge that matched where the team was headed. Upshaw went on to leave a lasting imprint on Raiders history. He anchored the offensive line for over a decade, protected quarterbacks, powered the run game, and remained a constant through coaching changes and roster turnover. As the Raiders grew into a championship-caliber franchise, Upshaw was part of multiple Super Bowl victories and provided the poise successful teams are built on. Los Angeles Chargers, LaDainian Tomlinson, 2001 NFL Draft. Trade down. With the first overall pick in hand, the Chargers set the board in 2001, while Atlanta, at number 5, had its sights fixed on Michael Vick. San Diego used that leverage to trade down, sending the top pick to the Falcons in exchange for the 5th overall pick, a 2001 third-rounder, a 2002 second-rounder, and wide receiver Tim Dwight. Atlanta got its quarterback, and San Diego retained a premium draft position while adding valuable assets. The Chargers used the 5th overall pick on LaDainian Tomlinson, a standout out of TCU. He was respected as a complete back, productive, versatile, and reliable, but he did not enter the league with the hype usually attached to a top 5 pick. Some questioned taking a running back that high, as offenses began leaning more toward the pass, and expectations centered more on stability than superstardom. Tomlinson was the centerpiece of the Chargers' offense from day one, combining vision, burst, receiving skill, and durability into relentless production. His career peaked with historic seasons, including an MVP year, and he delivered elite output across coaching changes and roster turnover. The brilliance of the move lies in the sequence. San Diego traded down, added assets, and still landed one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, a textbook example of extracting maximum value from the draft. Los Angeles Rams, Aaron Donald, 2014 NFL Draft. With the 13th overall pick in hand, St. Louis made no movement in the 2014 NFL Draft. The roster was competitive, but lacked a true game-altering presence, and most expectations pointed toward offense or edge rusher as priorities. Aaron Donald, an interior defender out of Pittsburgh, was widely respected for production and technique, but size concerns caused several teams ahead of St. Louis to pass, allowing him to slide into range. When the Rams went with Aaron Donald at pick 13, the response was positive but measured. Analysts praised his college dominance and quickness while questioning whether his undersized frame could hold up against NFL offensive lines. Draft night buzz was uncommon for interior defensive linemen, and the pick read as prudent, not transformative. There was appreciation for the value, not yet an understanding of the ceiling. Donald overwhelmed blockers from his rookie season on, winning with speed, leverage, and relentless disruption that forced offenses to change protection schemes entirely. Over time, he established himself as the most dominant interior defender of his era, stacking Defensive Player of the Year awards and anchoring highly skilled defenses through coaching changes and relocation. When the Rams won a Super Bowl, Donald was central to that run. Miami Dolphins, Dan Marino, 1983 NFL Draft. Miami held the 27th overall pick in the 1983 NFL Draft, well removed from the top of a quarterback-heavy board. This came from a position of strength, with Miami fresh off a Super Bowl run and drafting with control rather than urgency. But as the night unfolded, one storyline overtook everything else. Marino, long recognized for his rare passing talent, continued to slide. Concerns about his senior season, off-field whispers, and general hesitation caused team after team to pass, and Miami suddenly found an opportunity without making a single move. When the Dolphins went with Dan Marino at pick 27, the reaction was immediate surprise. The pick was framed as a major value grab, prompting questions about how a quarterback with that arm talent slid in such a deep quarterback class. Fans sensed they had benefited from league-wide overthinking, even if no one yet understood the full magnitude of what Miami had just secured. Marino took over early in his career and turned the Dolphins into an offensive powerhouse, rewriting passing expectations with a lightning release, high anticipation level, and aggressive downfield style. Even without another Super Bowl title, he kept Miami competitive for nearly 2 decades and produced numbers that stood untouched for years. Minnesota Vikings, Randy Moss, 1998 NFL Draft. The Vikings sat at number 21 overall in the 1998 NFL Draft, a slot not typically associated with draft-changing outcomes. Randy Moss, however, changed that equation. Recognized across the league as a uniquely gifted wide receiver prospect, Moss slid down the board due to off-field concerns and uneven risk tolerance across the league. Team after team passed, despite acknowledging his ability to transform an offense, and Minnesota stayed patient as the opportunity unfolded. Minnesota picking to Randy Moss at pick 21 sent a jolt through the room. Analysts labeled it the steal of the draft, and fans understood Minnesota had added a rare talent without surrendering any extra assets. There was no trade-up, no maneuvering, just discipline and timing paying off at the perfect moment. Moss delivered instant impact. As a rookie, he forced defenses to change coverage structures, opened space for the entire offense, and turned Minnesota into a highly explosive offense that dominated scoring during the 1998 season. His speed, size, and scoring range reset expectations for the position and produced historic offensive results. New England Patriots, Tom Brady, 2000 NFL Draft. In the 2000 NFL Draft, the Patriots didn't expect to unearth cornerstone talent, especially not down in the 6th round. At that stage, teams were targeting depth and special teams contributors, not long-term quarterbacks. Tom Brady came out of Michigan with a solid but unremarkable profile, limited starting experience, average arm strength, and few physical traits that stood out. The 199th overall draft pick by New England landed quietly across the league. It registered as a routine late-round choice, not a meaningful investment. Brady began his career buried on the depth chart, spending his rookie season learning the system and adjusting to the professional level. Nothing about his role suggested what was coming. That changed in 2001, when circumstances pushed him into the starting lineup. Poise and control set the tone, with consistency showing up when moments mattered most. The offense stabilized, and the Patriots began winning games that previously slipped away. With time, the pick proved almost impossible to contextualize. Brady developed into the most accomplished quarterback in NFL history, leading New England through multiple eras of sustained success as championships and records piled up. New York Giants, Lawrence Taylor, 1981 NFL Draft. The Giants held the 2nd overall pick in the 1981 NFL Draft, after years of decline left the franchise searching for direction. There was no trade involved, just a rare chance to add a player capable of shifting the team's trajectory. Selecting a linebacker that high was unconventional, but Lawrence Taylor out of North Carolina stood apart. His speed, aggression, and range were obvious, even if few expected a defender to justify such a premium slot. Any uncertainty vanished instantly. Taylor overwhelmed offenses from his rookie season, attacking quarterbacks with a speed the league was unprepared for. He forced offenses to change protections, adjust dropbacks, and rethink how the edge was defended. The Giants' defense transformed overnight, and Taylor grew into the focal point every opponent had to plan around just to function. As the years passed, the pick carried lasting consequence across the league. Taylor became one of 2 rare defensive players to win league MVP, anchored championship teams, and accelerated league-wide changes in blocking schemes and offensive strategy. With Taylor, the Giants landed a Hall of Fame-worthy player at pick 2. They secured a force that reshaped their franchise and permanently altered how defense was played in the NFL. New York Jets, Joe Namath, 1965 AFL Draft. In the 1965 AFL Draft, the Jets held the 1st overall pick during a time when pro football was divided between the AFL and NFL. This was more than a talent decision. It was a fight for legitimacy. Joe Namath, coming out of Alabama, was the most sought-after player in the country, and eligible for both leagues. When the NFL's St. Louis Cardinals also drafted him, a direct bidding war followed, putting enormous pressure on the Jets to act decisively. New York selected Namath first overall in the AFL draft and signed him to a record-setting contract, a move that sent shockwaves through football. NFL critics called the move reckless, while AFL supporters held it up as confirmation the league could match the moment financially and culturally. Overnight, the Jets shifted from a regional team to a national talking point, with Namath as the face of that ambition. On the field, the payoff reached its peak in the biggest moment imaginable. Namath brought confidence, visibility, and quarterback stability to the franchise, culminating in the Jets' Super Bowl III victory over the heavily favored Colts after his famous guarantee. That win validated the pick, elevated the Jets permanently, and accelerated the AFL-NFL merger. New Orleans Saints, Rickey Jackson, 1981, NFL Draft. New Orleans came into the 1981 NFL Draft trying to establish footing after prolonged struggles. No trades, no flash. The second round was about restraint, not star power. It was trying to add players who could steadily raise the floor of a struggling roster. Expectations were modest, and there was little attention surrounding New Orleans' selections that weekend. Rickey Jackson arrived from Pittsburgh as an athletic, versatile linebacker with clear pass-rushing ability, but little national hype. New Orleans picking him in the second round landed quietly. The expectation with Rickey centered on steady defensive value, not a change in franchise direction. There was no draft night buzz and no sense that something historic had just happened. That view changed as Jackson's career unfolded. No defensive player in Saints history matched his dominance, delivering pressure, durability, and leadership for more than a decade. Jackson was the centerpiece of the defense, forcing offenses to account for him every week and giving the franchise competitiveness during otherwise lean years. This second-round pick gave New Orleans legitimacy and proved the organization could develop elite talent long before its championship era arrived. Philadelphia Eagles, Reggie White, 1984, Supplemental Draft. The Philadelphia Eagles' most consequential draft decision came outside the standard NFL draft, through the 1984 Supplemental Draft, created for players who had signed with the USFL. Selecting a player in that process required surrendering a future NFL draft pick, making every choice a calculated risk. Philadelphia accepted that cost because Reggie White was not a typical prospect. He had already proven he could dominate professional competition. White arrived in the NFL after establishing himself in the USFL as a physically overwhelming pass rusher with rare power and speed. When the Eagles used their first-round supplemental selection on him, the reaction was immediate approval, mixed with respect for the gamble. Analysts understood the risk, but also recognized that Philadelphia had secured a player who looked capable of impacting NFL offenses. Fans saw it as a bold move from a franchise rarely associated with aggressive decisions. That aggression paid off instantly. From his first snap, White stood as one of the league's most feared defenders, forcing offenses to reshape protections and game plans around him. He anchored the Eagles' defense and emerged as one of the defining defensive players of his era. Pittsburgh Steelers, Joe Green, 1969, NFL Draft. Pittsburgh held the fourth overall pick in the 1969 NFL Draft, a sign of a franchise still searching for direction. There was no trade involved and no attempt to chase headlines. Pittsburgh understood this pick had to do more than add talent. It had to change how the team competed. At the time, the Steelers were not a league power, and sustained success had been elusive. Joe Green arrived from North Texas State as a dominant defensive lineman, but his selection drew skepticism. Defensive tackles were rarely taken that high, and Green came from a small program without national visibility. When Pittsburgh called his name, many questioned whether a player at that position and from that background justified such a premium pick. Expectations were cautious, not celebratory. Those doubts faded quickly. Green's presence transformed the defense through intensity, physical control, and leadership in the middle of the line. As talent accumulated around him, he anchored the steel curtain, driving a defensive run that defined the era and anchored multiple championships. San Francisco 49ers, Joe Montana, 1979 NFL Draft. San Francisco approached the 1979 NFL Draft deep in a rebuild, holding the 82nd overall pick in the third round without a trade. At that stage, teams were no longer searching for franchise quarterbacks, and Joe Montana's draft stock reflected that reality. Despite a strong resume at Notre Dame and a reputation for composure in big moments, concerns about arm strength and physical upside pushed him well down the board. The decision by San Francisco to select Montana passed with little reaction. The role forecast pointed to a dependable backup with leadership presence, short of centerpiece status. Early in his career, that evaluation held. Montana spent time learning, competing for snaps, and earning trust as the offense evolved under Bill Walsh. What set him apart was his poise under pressure and precision in a system built on timing and decision-making rather than raw power. Once Montana took control, everything changed. As the 49ers quarterback, he delivered multiple Super Bowl victories and epitomized a dynasty marked by execution and late-game mastery. His postseason performances set a new standard for the position and shaped an entire era of football. Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson, 2012 NFL Draft. Seattle held the 75th overall pick in the third round of the 2012 NFL Draft without involving any trade, and the team entered the process with no urgent need to address the quarterback position early, ultimately selecting Russell Wilson in the third round. Matt Flynn had just been signed in free agency, and Russell Wilson was placed largely in a depth role. Despite an outstanding final season at Wisconsin, concerns about Wilson's height pushed him down the board, and most teams saw him as a long shot to ever start. Seattle's decision on Wilson in the 2012 draft was met with little immediate fanfare across the league. Analysts framed the pick as insurance rather than competition, assuming Flynn would be the starter. Wilson's college tape earned praise for efficiency and leadership, but league-wide thinking held that physical limitations would cap his ceiling. Expectations for the pick were modest, especially for a mid-round quarterback. That narrative flipped quickly. Wilson won the starting job as a rookie and elevated the offense with poise, accuracy, and play extension ability. As his career unfolded, he delivered a Super Bowl championship and multiple deep playoff runs at the game's most important position. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Warren Sapp, 1995 NFL Draft. With the 12th overall pick in hand, Tampa Bay made no movement in the 1995 NFL Draft. The franchise was still trying to shed a reputation built on losing seasons, but the front office had begun investing heavily in defense. Draft night presented a rare opportunity when Warren Sapp, widely projected as a top 5 talent, started slipping down the board due to off-field concerns. As Sapp continued to fall, the tone of the draft shifted. Analysts openly questioned how far he could drop, and by the time Tampa Bay was on the clock, the value was undeniable. The number 12 overall pick by Tampa Bay triggered an immediate reaction. The pick was labeled one of the steals of the draft, with Tampa Bay securing high-class talent without sacrificing any additional assets. Sapp validated that assessment quickly. He stood as the interior force that anchored one of the league's most feared defenses, collapsing pockets, and reshaping how offenses built protection schemes. His presence fueled Tampa Bay's rise into a championship-caliber team and laid the foundation for the franchise's most successful era. Tennessee Titans, Houston Oilers, Steve McNair, 1995 NFL Draft. The Oilers sat at number 3 overall in the 1995 NFL Draft during a period of uncertainty. Warren Moon was gone, the quarterback position was unresolved, and the franchise itself was approaching a major transition that would eventually lead to relocation. With no trade involved, the Oilers used the pick on Steve McNair, betting on him to carry the team forward through instability, rather than provide a short-term fix. McNair arrived from Alcorn State with massive production but significant questions. He came from a small program, ran a spread-based offense, and faced concerns about accuracy, durability, and translation to the NFL. The reaction to the pick was cautious. McNair's upside drew acknowledgement, but the decision added risk to a franchise navigating uncertainty. Early returns reinforced that doubt, as McNair dealt with injuries, shared snaps, and uneven play during his first seasons. Over time, McNair's toughness and competitiveness reshaped the evaluation. As the franchise moved from Houston to Tennessee, he was a constant presence, absorbing punishment, extending plays, and carrying the offense through resilience. By the Titans era, he had grown into the leader of the team, guiding them to sustained success and a Super Bowl appearance that came down to a single yard. Washington Commanders, Sammy Baugh, 1937 NFL Draft. In 1937, the Washington franchise took part in only the league's second draft, as professional football was still evolving. This was only the league's second ever draft, and teams were still learning how to evaluate positions and long-term value. With the 6th overall pick and no trade involved, Washington followed the straightforward logic of the era. Select someone who could contribute in multiple ways. Sammy Baugh out of TCU fit that mold, even if his skill set challenged conventional thinking. Baugh was unusual for his time. He was a true passer with accuracy and vision in an era dominated by conservative, run-heavy offenses. Washington's move in the 1937 NFL Draft was met with curiosity rather than excitement. During that period, the forward pass remained a secondary tactic, and the quarterback was rarely positioned as the central driver of victory. Baugh's selection represented a quiet gamble on a different way to play the game. That gamble paid off instantly. Baugh led Washington to an NFL championship in his rookie season and demonstrated that a pass-oriented offense could be efficient, controlled, and successful. His impact went far beyond quarterbacking. He also excelled as a defensive back and punter in the era of two-way football. Arizona Cardinals, Kevin Kolb trade, 2011. In 2011, the Arizona Cardinals believed they had finally found their franchise quarterback. Coming off a season of instability at the position, Arizona targeted Kevin Kolb, who had flashed potential in limited action with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cardinals thought they were buying upside, not realizing how steep the cost would become. To get Kolb, Arizona sent cornerback Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and a second-round pick to Philadelphia. Rodgers-Cromartie was already a Pro Bowl caliber defender and one of the league's better cover corners. The second-rounder only added to the risk. The return never materialized. Kolb struggled to stay healthy and struggled even more when he did play. Across 2 seasons in Arizona, he never won more than 3 games in a single year as a starter. He missed time with concussions, turnovers piled up, and the offense never stabilized. By 2013, the Cardinals had already moved on. Meanwhile, Philadelphia benefited immediately. Rodgers-Cromartie stepped into their secondary and provided strong play before later becoming a key piece of Denver's Super Bowl 50 defense. Arizona, on the other hand, was forced back into quarterback limbo for years. The damage was twofold. The Cardinals lost a premier defensive player and a valuable draft asset, all for a quarterback who failed to elevate the team or stay on the field. It delayed their rebuild and forced them to keep chasing answers under center. Atlanta Falcons, Brett Favre trade, 1992. In 1992, the Atlanta Falcons made a decision that would haunt the franchise for decades. Just 1 year earlier, Atlanta had drafted Brett Favre in the second round. He was raw, reckless, and struggled early, but the arm talent was obvious. Still, the Falcons' coaching staff lost patience quickly. Off-field concerns and inexperience convinced them he wasn't the future, so they traded him. Atlanta sent Favre to the Green Bay Packers in exchange for a first-round pick, which became running back Tony Smith. The return was modest, even by early 90s standards. The expectation was simple. Atlanta wanted stability. Green Bay wanted upside. The result could not have been more lopsided. Favre took over as Green Bay's starter almost immediately, and went on to become one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in NFL history. 3 straight MVP awards, a Super Bowl title, over 70,000 passing yards, Iron Man durability that redefined the position. Meanwhile, Atlanta spent the next decade cycling through quarterbacks, never fully recovering from letting a generational talent slip away. Tony Smith never became a cornerstone player, and the trade quickly became a symbol of organizational impatience. What makes this trade especially painful is the timing. Favre didn't need years to develop. He broke out almost instantly. Atlanta didn't just misjudge his ceiling, they misjudged how close he already was. Baltimore Ravens, Kyle Boller draft trade, 2003. In 2003, the Baltimore Ravens were desperate to find a long-term answer at quarterback. Their defense was championship caliber, but the offense had stalled after the Super Bowl run. Baltimore believed Kyle Boller had the tools to change that. He had arm strength, athleticism, and came from a big program at California. The Ravens convinced themselves he was worth aggressive movement on draft day. To secure Boller, Baltimore traded up 22 spots with the New England Patriots, sending a future first-round pick as part of the deal. At the time, it was a bold gamble for a franchise that rarely moved up in the draft. The problem was the return never matched the price. Boller struggled almost immediately. He lacked consistency, accuracy, and pocket awareness. Over 5 seasons as Baltimore's starter, he never threw more than 19 touchdowns in a year and finished with more interceptions than touchdown passes. The offense remained limited, forcing the Ravens to win games despite the quarterback position instead of because of it. The long-term cost made the trade even worse. The Patriots used the future first-round pick to select Vince Wilfork, who became a cornerstone of their dynasty and a Hall of Fame-level defensive tackle. Baltimore, meanwhile, spent years searching for another quarterback before eventually landing Joe Flacco in 2008. Buffalo Bills, Kelvin Benjamin, trade, 2017. In 2017, the Buffalo Bills believed they were one wide receiver away from stabilizing their offense. At the trade deadline, Buffalo sent a 3rd-round pick and a 7th-round pick to the Carolina Panthers for Kelvin Benjamin. The move was meant to give Tyrod Taylor a true number one target as the Bills pushed for their first playoff appearance in nearly 2 decades. It backfired almost immediately. Benjamin arrived out of shape and struggled to separate from defenders. Over parts of 2 seasons in Buffalo, he caught fewer than 25 passes total. His effort was questioned. His role diminished quickly, and tensions reportedly grew in the locker room. By the middle of the 2018 season, Buffalo had already released him. The opportunity cost made the trade worse. That 3rd-round pick could have been used to build around a young core that would soon include Josh Allen. Instead, it was spent on a short-term rental who never contributed meaningfully. The Bills eventually ended their playoff drought anyway, but Benjamin had nothing to do with it. The trade became a symbol of a front office move driven by urgency rather than evaluation. Carolina Panthers, Sean Gilbert, trade, 1998. In 1998, the Carolina Panthers made one of the most aggressive trades in franchise history in an effort to rebuild their defense. Carolina sent 2 first-round draft picks to Washington in exchange for defensive tackle Sean Gilbert, believing they were acquiring a dominant interior force entering his prime. At the time, giving up multiple firsts was reserved for elite, game-changing talent. Gilbert was productive, but not transformative. Over 4 seasons in Carolina, he recorded solid numbers and made a Pro Bowl, but he never became the kind of defensive cornerstone that justifies sacrificing 2 premium draft picks. He didn't elevate the unit, didn't change offensive game plans, and didn't push the Panthers into contention. The real damage came from what Carolina lost. Those 2 first-round picks stripped the Panthers of flexibility during a critical period in the franchise's development. Instead of adding young, cost-controlled talent, Carolina was locked into an expensive veteran whose impact plateaued quickly. By 2002, Gilbert was gone, and the Panthers were left without either the player or the draft capital. This trade wasn't a total failure on the field, but relative to the cost, It was a major overpay. Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky Draft Trade, 2017. In 2017, the Chicago Bears believed they had identified their franchise quarterback. Holding the third overall pick, Chicago traded up one spot with the San Francisco 49ers to select Mitchell Trubisky. The cost was significant. The Bears sent a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and a future third-round pick to move up a single position. The evaluation proved disastrous. Trubisky started 50 games over 4 seasons, but never developed into a consistent or reliable passer. He struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and reading defenses. While the Bears did make the playoffs twice during his tenure, the offense consistently held the team back. What makes the trade unforgivable is who was left on the board. Chicago passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, both of whom became elite quarterbacks almost immediately. The Bears didn't just miss, they paid extra to miss. San Francisco used the additional picks to help rebuild their roster, while Chicago burned valuable draft capital chasing a quarterback who never matched the hype. By 2021, Trubisky was gone, and the Bears were starting over once again. This trade represents the worst-case scenario. A team moved up, paid a premium, and still walked away with the wrong player at the most important position. Cincinnati Bengals, Ki-Jana Carter, Draft Trade, 1995. In 1995, the Cincinnati Bengals were convinced they were landing a franchise-defining running back. Cincinnati traded up to secure Ki-Jana Carter, sending the 5th overall pick and a second-round pick to move higher in the draft. Carter was coming off a dominant college career at Penn State and was viewed as a rare combination of speed, power, and explosiveness. The gamble unraveled almost immediately. Carter tore his ACL in his very first preseason game before ever taking a regular season snap. He missed his entire rookie year, and when he returned, he never looked the same. Across 3 seasons in Cincinnati, he rushed for just 747 total yards and never became a focal point of the offense. The cost made the outcome far worse. The Bengals didn't just miss on a pick. They surrendered additional draft capital that could have helped rebuild a struggling roster. Instead, they tied their future to a player who never recovered physically, forcing the franchise to reset yet again. This trade wasn't about poor effort or bad attitude. It was about risk and timing. Cincinnati paid a premium for upside, and the injury erased it before it ever had a chance to materialize. Cleveland Browns, Brady Quinn Draft Trade, 2007. In 2007, the Cleveland Browns believed they had stolen their franchise quarterback. Brady Quinn slid down the draft board, and Cleveland aggressively moved up to secure him, trading a 2007 second-round pick and a 2008 first-round pick to make the selection. At the time, Quinn was viewed as a safe prospect with size, arm strength, and experience at Notre Dame. The investment never paid off. Quinn struggled to win the starting job, then struggled even more when he got it. Across 3 seasons in Cleveland, he started just 12 games, throwing 12 touchdowns against 17 interceptions. The offense stagnated, confidence eroded, and by 2010, the Browns had already moved on. The aftermath made the trade look even worse. Cleveland eventually traded Quinn to Denver for Peyton Hillis and a 6th-round pick. While Hillis had one memorable season, the Browns had already lost the more valuable asset, the future first-round pick they gave up to draft Quinn in the first place. That pick represented a lost opportunity during a critical rebuild window. Instead of adding foundational talent, Cleveland tied itself to a quarterback who never stabilized the position. This trade fits a familiar Browns pattern from that era: high expectations, aggressive movement, and a quick reset when things went wrong. Dallas Cowboys, Joey Galloway Trade, 2000. In 2000, the Dallas Cowboys were trying to jumpstart an offense that had stalled after the dynasty years. Dallas traded 2 first-round picks to the Seattle Seahawks for wide receiver Joey Galloway, believing they were acquiring an elite deep threat to pair with Troy Aikman and revive the passing game. At the time, Galloway was one of the fastest receivers in the league and coming off multiple 1,000-yard seasons. The trade unraveled almost immediately. Galloway tore his ACL in the first game of the season and missed the entire year. When he returned, Aikman was gone. The offense had changed, and Galloway never became the focal point Dallas envisioned. Over 4 seasons with the Cowboys, he never reached 1,000 yards and scored just 16 touchdowns. Seattle, meanwhile, capitalized on the draft haul. Those picks became key pieces in rebuilding the Seahawks roster during the early 2000s, while Dallas struggled to regain relevance. The issue wasn't just bad luck. The Cowboys paid an elite price for a player at a volatile position without accounting for risk. 2 first-round picks represented years of roster flexibility, and Dallas surrendered both for production they never received. Denver Broncos, Steve Tensey trade, 1968 to 1969. In the late 1960s, the Denver Broncos were desperate to stabilize the quarterback position and believed Steve Tensey was the answer. Denver traded 2 first-round picks to the San Diego Chargers for Steve Tensey, a backup behind John Hadle. The move was aggressive even by AFL standards, and it assumed Tensey could immediately step in as a franchise starter. That assumption was wrong. Tensey struggled badly in Denver. In 1969, he led the Broncos to a 3-11 record while throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. The offense stalled, the team regressed, and it quickly became clear that Denver had overpaid for a quarterback who was not starter caliber. The long-term damage came from the draft capital. Those 2 first-round picks could have helped Denver build foundational talent during a critical era. Instead, the Broncos sacrificed years of roster flexibility for a player they moved on from almost immediately. This trade stands out because it wasn't a near miss or a gamble that just didn't work out. It was a misevaluation from the start. Denver paid a premium price for a backup quarterback and received backup-level production. Detroit Lions, Bobby Lane trade, 1958. In 1958, the Detroit Lions made a decision that altered the trajectory of the franchise for decades. Detroit traded Bobby Lane, a Hall of Fame quarterback and 3-time NFL champion, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lane had led the Lions to multiple titles in the 1950s and was the face of the franchise. The trade was driven largely by internal conflict and the belief that Detroit could move forward without him. They were wrong. After the trade, the Lions collapsed. They would not win another playoff game for decades, while Lane helped stabilize the Steelers and laid the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the NFL's most successful franchises. Detroit, meanwhile, entered one of the longest stretches of futility in league history. The move became so infamous that it spawned what fans still refer to as the curse of Bobby Lane, the idea that Detroit was doomed after trading away its greatest quarterback. While the curse is symbolic, the results were real. Detroit failed to return to championship relevance, cycling through coaches and quarterbacks without success. This trade wasn't just bad value. It stripped the franchise of leadership, identity, and stability in one move. Green Bay Packers, Terrell Buckley trade, 1995. In the mid-1990s, the Green Bay Packers quietly made one of the most lopsided trades in franchise history. Green Bay traded Terrell Buckley, a former 5th overall pick, to the Miami Dolphins for future considerations. At the time, Buckley had already shown flashes of being a quality cover corner, but the Packers had grown impatient with his inconsistency. The return was essentially nothing. Buckley went on to enjoy a long, productive career with multiple teams, becoming a reliable starter and eventually winning a Super Bowl later in his career. He carved out more than a decade in the league after leaving Green Bay, proving he was far from a lost cause. The Packers, meanwhile, gained no tangible asset in return, no draft pick, no player, nothing that could be used to improve the roster. This trade stands out not because Buckley became a superstar, but because Green Bay gave away a valuable former top 5 pick without securing any meaningful compensation. Even modest draft capital would have softened the blow. Houston Texans, DeAndre Hopkins trade, 2020. In 2020, the Houston Texans made what is widely viewed as one of the worst trades in modern NFL history. Houston traded DeAndre Hopkins, an all-pro receiver and the face of their offense, to the Arizona Cardinals. In return, the Texans received running back David Johnson, a second-round pick, and a late-round pick swap. The imbalance was obvious immediately. Hopkins was coming off multiple elite seasons and was one of the most consistent receivers in football. He required no special system, rarely missed games, and routinely dominated double coverage. Arizona plugged him in and watched him post another all-pro level season almost instantly. Houston, meanwhile, absorbed Johnson's contract and declining production. He never became a focal point of the offense and was gone within 2 seasons. The draft compensation did little to offset the loss of a generational talent at a premium position. What made the trade worse was the timing. Houston was still in a competitive window with Deshaun Watson on a rookie contract. Instead of maximizing that window, the Texans removed their best offensive weapon and weakened the roster on purpose. This trade wasn't driven by cap necessity or long-term strategy. It was the result of poor evaluation and internal mismanagement. Indianapolis Colts, Trent Richardson trade, 2013. In 2013, the Indianapolis Colts believed they were one piece away from contending with Andrew Luck on a rookie contract. 2 games into the season, Indianapolis traded a first-round pick to the Cleveland Browns for Trent Richardson, a former top 3 selection who was supposed to stabilize the backfield. The urgency was clear. The Colts wanted immediate production, not long-term development. They never got it. Richardson struggled almost instantly. He lacked vision, missed obvious running lanes, and failed to create yards after contact. In 2 seasons with Indianapolis, he averaged just 3.1 yards per carry and never reached 1,000 rushing yards. By 2015, he was out of the league entirely. The cost made the failure even more damaging. That first-round pick could have been used to add protection for Andrew Luck or strengthen a roster that was still thin in key areas. Instead, it was spent on a running back whose decline was already underway. What separates this trade from others is how quickly the warning signs appeared. Cleveland was willing to move on from Richardson almost immediately, and Indianapolis ignored what that suggested. The Colts gambled premium draft capital on a position with short shelf life and got replacement-level production in return. During one of the most important windows in franchise history, that mistake mattered. Jacksonville Jaguars, Blaine Gabbert draft trade, 2011. In 2011, the Jacksonville Jaguars believed they had found their quarterback of the future. Jacksonville traded up into the top 10 of the draft to select Blaine Gabbert, sending multiple draft picks to move from the middle of the first round to the 10th overall selection. The move was aggressive, especially for a franchise that was still rebuilding its roster. The evaluation failed quickly. Gabbert struggled from the moment he stepped onto the field. He lacked pocket awareness, played skittish under pressure, and failed to develop as a passer. Over 3 seasons in Jacksonville, he threw more interceptions than touchdowns and never showed signs of becoming a reliable starter. What made the trade especially damaging was the process behind it. Reports later revealed that the Jaguars' coaching staff was not fully aligned on the decision. The front office made the move without complete buy-in, leading to a fractured development plan from the start. Gabbert was placed in unstable systems with frequent coaching changes, which only accelerated the failure. The Jaguars wasted valuable draft capital chasing a quarterback who was not ready and never became one. By 2014, Gabbert was gone, and Jacksonville was forced back into another rebuild. Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Montana trade, 1993. In 1993, the Kansas City Chiefs believed they were one quarterback away from a Super Bowl run. Kansas City traded a first-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers for Joe Montana, one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in NFL history. The move was meant to bring championship experience to a franchise that had struggled to advance deep into the playoffs. The results were mixed. Montana played well when healthy, leading the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game in the 1993 season. But injuries limited his availability, and he never took Kansas City to the Super Bowl. After just 2 seasons, his run with the team was over. The trade becomes more questionable when considering the cost. That first-round pick represented a long-term building block for a roster that still lacked offensive firepower. Instead, the Chiefs invested premium draft capital in an aging quarterback whose window was extremely short. While the move energized the fan base, it didn't deliver the ultimate goal. This trade stands out not because Montana failed, but because the investment didn't align with the outcome. Kansas City paid a future-focused price for a short-term return. It remains one of the franchise's most debated trades. Not disastrous on the field, but costly in hindsight given how brief the payoff turned out to be. Las Vegas Raiders, Randy Moss trade, 2007. In 2007, the Raiders believed they were cutting ties with a player who no longer fit their direction. Las Vegas, then Oakland, traded Randy Moss to the New England Patriots for a fourth-round pick. Moss was coming off a quiet season and had clashed with the organization, leading the Raiders to believe his best football was behind him. That assessment was wildly wrong. Moss immediately exploded in New England, catching 23 touchdowns in 2007 and helping set multiple league records. He became the centerpiece of one of the most dominant offenses in NFL history and reminded the league exactly how dangerous he still was. The Raiders received minimal value in return. The fourth-round pick did nothing to change the trajectory of the franchise, while Moss helped power New England to an undefeated regular season. What makes this trade particularly painful is how quickly the mistake became obvious. Moss didn't need time to rediscover himself. He thrived instantly once placed in a functional system with an elite quarterback. Oakland misread motivation as decline. They sold a Hall of Fame talent at his lowest perceived value and watched him reach his peak somewhere else. Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Leaf draft trade, 1998. In 1998, the Chargers believed they had secured a franchise quarterback to define the next decade. To draft Ryan Leaf, Los Angeles, then San Diego, traded a package of draft picks that included a future first-round pick and a second-round pick. The move was designed to land one of the top two quarterbacks in the class, and at the time, Leaf was viewed as comparable to Peyton Manning. The result was catastrophic. Leaf struggled immediately with accuracy, decision-making, and maturity. Across 3 seasons with the Chargers, he threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and became known for locker room issues as much as on-field failures. His time as a starter ended quickly, and his NFL career collapsed shortly after. The long-term cost was devastating. The Chargers didn't just miss on a quarterback. They surrendered valuable draft capital that could have stabilized the roster during a crucial rebuild. Instead, they were forced to start over almost immediately, delaying progress for years. This trade stands as one of the most infamous draft moves in league history. It combined poor evaluation, heavy investment, and a complete lack of return. Los Angeles Rams, Jerome Bettis trade, 1996. In 1996, the Rams made a move that looked logical at the time, but aged terribly. Los Angeles traded Jerome Bettis and a third-round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange for a second-round and a fourth-round pick. The Rams believed Bettis didn't fit their offensive direction and felt his running style no longer matched what they wanted to do. They were completely wrong. Bettis went on to become the face of the Steelers' offense for a decade. He rushed for over 10,000 yards in Pittsburgh, became a perennial Pro Bowl player, won a Super Bowl, and eventually earned a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His physical style aged well, and he remained productive deep into his career. The Rams, meanwhile, got minimal return. The draft picks failed to produce players anywhere close to Bettis' impact, and the team continued to flounder offensively for years before finally rebuilding in the late 1990s. What makes this trade painful is how misjudged the evaluation was. Bettis wasn't declining. He was entering his prime. The Rams didn't just trade away a good player. They traded away a future Hall of Famer for marginal assets. Miami Dolphins, Dante Culpepper trade, 2006. In 2006, the Miami Dolphins believed they had secured their quarterback of the future. Miami traded a second-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings for Dante Culpepper, betting that he would fully recover from a major knee injury. The move was meant to bring stability and upside to a franchise searching for a long-term answer under center. The gamble failed almost immediately. Culpepper struggled with mobility and accuracy, and his knee never returned to pre-injury form. He started just 4 games for Miami before being benched. The offense stalled, and the Dolphins finished the season with one of the worst records in the league. The trade became even more painful in hindsight. That same offseason, Miami passed on Drew Brees, who went on to sign with New Orleans and become one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. While the trade itself cost only a second-round pick, the decision symbolized a massive organizational misread. Culpepper was released after the season, and Miami was forced back into another rebuild. The quarterback search continued for years, while Brees rewrote the record books elsewhere. Minnesota Vikings, Herschel Walker trade, 1989. In 1989, the Minnesota Vikings made the most infamous trade in NFL history. Minnesota traded for Herschel Walker, believing he was the final piece to push an already strong roster into Super Bowl contention. To acquire him from the Dallas Cowboys, the Vikings sent a massive haul of players and draft picks, including multiple first-round selections. The scale of the deal was unprecedented. Minnesota gave up 5 players and 8 draft picks in total. Walker produced solid numbers, but he never elevated the offense or delivered postseason success. The Vikings reached the playoffs, but the Super Bowl push never materialized. Dallas, on the other hand, turned the draft capital into a dynasty. The Cowboys used the picks acquired from Minnesota to select cornerstone players who formed the backbone of 3 Super Bowl teams in the 1990s. What Minnesota saw as a short-term upgrade became the foundation of Dallas's dominance. This trade didn't just fail for the Vikings, it reshaped the entire league. New England Patriots, Chad Jackson draft trade, 2006. In 2006, the New England Patriots made an uncharacteristically aggressive move to address their wide receiver depth. New England traded up in the second round to draft Chad Jackson, sending additional draft capital to move ahead of other teams. Jackson was viewed as a speed threat who could stretch defenses and grow into a featured role in the offense. The plan never materialized. Jackson struggled to learn the playbook and failed to earn Tom Brady's trust. Over 2 seasons in New England, he recorded just 13 receptions for 153 yards and did not score a single touchdown. By 2008, he was already off the roster. The issue wasn't just the player, it was the process. The Patriots rarely trade up for skill position players, preferring to let value fall to them. In this case, they paid extra for a receiver who never became a contributor, turning multiple draft assets into almost nothing. While New England recovered quickly and continued winning championships, this trade stands out because it broke from their usual discipline and failed completely. New Orleans Saints, Ricky Williams draft trade, 1999. In 1999, the New Orleans Saints made one of the boldest draft day moves the league had ever seen. New Orleans traded its entire 1999 draft class and multiple picks from the 2000 draft to Washington in order to select Ricky Williams. Head coach Mike Ditka believed Williams was a generational talent and worth any price necessary. The cost was enormous. The Saints surrendered 8 draft picks in total, stripping the roster of young, affordable talent for multiple seasons. Williams produced solid numbers early, rushing for over 1,000 yards in his second season, but the team never became a true contender during his tenure. By 2002, Williams was gone. New Orleans traded him to Miami just 3 years after acquiring him, officially closing the book on the experiment. Meanwhile, Washington used the haul of draft picks to accelerate its rebuild, while the Saints were left dealing with the long-term effects of an emptied pipeline. This trade didn't fail because Williams was bad. It failed because no running back could justify that level of investment. New Orleans sacrificed roster depth, flexibility, and future planning for a single player. It remains one of the clearest examples of how overcommitment can derail an entire franchise. New York Giants, Leonard Williams trade, 2019. In 2019, the New York Giants made a move that made little sense given where the franchise stood. At 2-6, clearly in a rebuilding phase, the the Giants traded a third-round pick and a conditional fourth-round pick to the New York Jets for Leonard Williams. Williams was a solid interior defender, but he was also in the final year of his contract and not considered a difference maker. The timing was the biggest issue. New York wasn't one player away from contending. They were transitioning from the Eli Manning era, breaking in Daniel Jones, and lacked depth across the roster. Trading mid-round picks for a pending free agent ran directly against rebuild logic. Williams did re-sign with the Giants and later had a strong 2020 season, but the initial trade still came at a steep cost. The draft capital could have been used to develop younger, cheaper talent during a critical roster reset. What makes this trade stand out is not that Williams was a bad player, it's that the Giants paid a premium without leverage, urgency, or a competitive window. New York Jets, Tim Tebow trade, 2012. In 2012, the New York Jets believed they could recreate lightning in a bottle. Fresh off a playoff upset in Denver, the Jets traded a fourth-round pick to acquire Tim Tebow. The move was pitched as a creative addition, a special package player who could add a new wrinkle to the offense while backing up Mark Sanchez. It turned into a disaster. The Jets never figured out how to use Tebow. He appeared in just a handful of snaps all season, rarely threw the ball, and spent most games on the sideline, while media attention followed him everywhere. The quarterback room became a constant distraction, and Sanchez's development stalled under the pressure. On the field, the results were just as bad. The Jets finished 6-10. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league, and the experiment ended after one season. Tebow was released the following offseason without ever having a defined role. The problem wasn't the price, it was the plan. New York traded for a quarterback without committing to him, without building an offense around his strengths, and without clarity on how he fit into the team's direction. The move created chaos instead of competition. Philadelphia Eagles, Kiko Alonso trade, 2015. In 2015, the Philadelphia Eagles made a move driven more by scheme obsession than roster value. Philadelphia traded LaShawn McCoy, the best offensive player on the roster, to the Buffalo Bills for linebacker Kiko Alonso. Head coach Chip Kelly believed McCoy did not fit his offense, and that Alonso would anchor the defense. The trade was immediately unbalanced. McCoy continued producing at a high level in Buffalo, remaining one of the league's most consistent running backs for years. Alonso, meanwhile, struggled to stay healthy and never found a clear role in Philadelphia's defense. He played just 11 games in one season before being traded again. The Eagles gained almost nothing from the move. Philadelphia lost its offensive identity, weakened an already struggling unit, and failed to replace McCoy's production. Alonso was gone quickly, and the defense never benefited from his presence in a meaningful way. What made the trade worse was how avoidable it was. McCoy was still in his prime, under contract, and beloved by the fan base. Philadelphia moved him not because of decline, but because of philosophy. Pittsburgh Steelers, Santonio Holmes trade, 2010. In 2010, the Pittsburgh Steelers made a decision based on risk management rather than production. Pittsburgh traded Santonio Holmes to the New York Jets for a fifth-round pick. Holmes was still in his prime and had just been named Super Bowl MVP 2 seasons earlier after delivering one of the most iconic catches in NFL history. On the field, the move was questionable. Holmes remained productive with the Jets, becoming a reliable target and continuing to contribute at a high level when healthy. Pittsburgh, meanwhile, moved forward without a proven playmaker at wide receiver and leaned heavily on a developing group of younger players. The trade was driven largely by off-field concerns and contract issues. The Steelers prioritized locker room stability and long-term control over immediate production. While Pittsburgh eventually rebuilt the position successfully, the return value was minimal. A fifth-round pick for a Super Bowl MVP-level talent represented a significant loss in pure football terms. San Francisco 49ers, O.J. Simpson trade, 1978. In 1978, the San Francisco 49ers made a move driven more by name recognition than evaluation. San Francisco traded 5 draft picks, including the first overall pick in the draft, to acquire O.J. Simpson from the Buffalo Bills. Simpson was one of the most famous players in football history, but by the time the trade was made, his best years were already behind him. The production never justified the cost. Simpson was 31 years old and clearly declining. Over 2 seasons with San Francisco, he failed to rush for 1,000 yards and never resembled the dominant back he had been earlier in his career. The 49ers did not become contenders, and the offense never revolved around him successfully. The opportunity cost was massive. The draft capital San Francisco gave up could have been used to accelerate a rebuild that was still years away. Instead, those assets were spent on a short-term fading star. The trade provided publicity, but little on-field value. Seattle Seahawks. Tony Dorsett trade rights, 1977. In 1977, the Seattle Seahawks made a decision that quietly became one of the franchise's biggest regrets. Seattle held the rights to draft Tony Dorsett, one of the most celebrated college players in history. Instead of selecting him, the Seahawks traded his draft rights to the Dallas Cowboys in exchange for future draft picks. The value never came close. Dorsett immediately became a star in Dallas, rushing for over 1,000 yards as a rookie and going on to build a Hall of Fame career. He became the face of the Cowboys' offense for years and played a major role in their sustained success. Seattle, meanwhile, failed to convert the acquired picks into comparable impact. As a young expansion franchise, they passed on a generational talent who could have anchored the offense and accelerated their development. What makes this trade painful is the clarity of hindsight. Dorsett was not a projection. He was a proven, elite talent entering the league. Seattle chose flexibility over certainty and watched a future Hall of Famer thrive elsewhere. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Darrelle Revis trade, 2013. In 2013, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers believed they were one elite defender away from turning the corner. Tampa Bay traded a first-round pick and a conditional pick to the New York Jets for Darrelle Revis, one of the most dominant cornerbacks of his era. The expectation was simple. Revis would erase one side of the field and transform the defense overnight. That transformation never happened. Revis struggled in Tampa Bay's zone-heavy scheme and never looked comfortable. His effort was questioned, his impact was minimal, and the defense did not improve. After just 1 season, the Buccaneers released him, effectively turning a first-round pick into a 1-year rental. The aftermath made the trade look even worse. Revis immediately returned to elite form after leaving Tampa Bay, signing with New England and helping the Patriots win the Super Bowl the very next season. His decline in Tampa was not permanent. It was situational. Tampa Bay misjudged fit, timing, and commitment. They paid a premium price without a long-term plan and received none of the benefits they envisioned. Tennessee Titans, Steve Largent trade, 1976. In 1976, the Houston Oilers made a decision that would echo through NFL history. Houston, now the Tennessee Titans, traded Steve Largent and a 4th-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks in exchange for an 8th-round pick. At the time, Largent was an unproven rookie and considered expendable. The evaluation couldn't have been more wrong. Largent went on to become one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history. He retired as the league's all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns, and later earned a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He became the cornerstone of Seattle's offense for over a decade. Houston received virtually nothing in return. The 8th-round pick had no lasting impact, while the Oilers forfeited the chance to develop a Hall of Fame talent internally. The trade became a textbook example of misjudging player development and upside. What makes this move especially painful is how little Houston received. This wasn't a calculated risk, it was a giveaway. Washington Commanders, Robert Griffin III trade, 2012. In 2012, Washington made one of the most aggressive trades in modern NFL history in pursuit of a franchise quarterback. Washington sent 3 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick to the St. Louis Rams to move up and draft Robert Griffin III. The move was fueled by urgency. Griffin was electric, coming off a Heisman-winning season and viewed as a transformational talent. The payoff was immediate. Griffin delivered one of the best rookie quarterback seasons the league had ever seen, leading Washington to a division title and reviving a dormant fan base. For 1 year, the trade looked justified. Then, the window closed. A devastating knee injury late in his rookie season altered his career. Washington rushed him back. The offense lost its identity, and his development stalled. By 2015, Griffin was no longer the starter, and the franchise was left without the draft capital needed to pivot quickly. The Rams, meanwhile, turned the picks into a foundation that fueled their rebuild and eventual return to contention. Washington lost years of flexibility trying to recover from the trade. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.